Two. Recording 5, 6. Hey, look at that. Hey, everybody. What's up, homies? Oh, 9, 10. Perfect. There we go. Welcome back. Welcome back. Good evening, good afternoon, or good night, depending on where you're from, where you're joining us from tonight. Um, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome to the AP Human Geo 5 Cram finales. Right, one last hurrah before the AP Human Geo exam. Um, so Real quick, again, if you're joining us for the first time, my name is Hector Vela. I'm a teacher host here, joined by our awesome student host you see here on the left-hand side with me. If you want to do a quick run through, y'all, just introduce yourselves one more time, top to bottom here.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan. I'll also be presenting today.
Haley, just a heads up. We saw your mouth move, but your mic wasn't working. Something that we should double check. But yeah. That's lit. That's Leah, everybody.
Okay, hey guys, I'm Tejal and I'm going to be presenting tonight, so I'm super excited.
Hey guys, I'm Eliza. I'm not presenting tonight, but I'll be in the chat helping you guys out and making polls.
Right on. Awesome. Well, like we were just saying tonight, we're going to have two presenters. Specifically, it's gonna be Megan and Tejal. We're gonna be covering two more topics. Um, two more units. Pardon me, not just topics. Two more whole units tonight. In case you missed it, our plan is going to be to cover specifically a unit, provide some cram quiz, take a quick break, and then the same thing, cover a unit, do some cram quiz, and then head out. Um, Tonight's specific plan is to get to units 3 and 4, and fingers crossed, pray to, some Unit 3 jokes here, pray to whichever God you might believe in, that we don't have any tech issues and we don't miss another 20 to 30 minutes of our time with you guys and have to cut out some content again. If you joined us last night, we promise we will make that up to you guys when we get to the later halves of our cram finales. We will make up the rest of Unit 2, we promise. But yeah, any case, just remember, we want to make sure we're supportive of each other. We want to make sure we're patient, we're kind with one another. This is a study session with people just like you. I'm a teacher. I just worked 8 hours, just like you guys went to school for 8 hours today. All of our student hosts are, if not students in high school, they are students in college, and they also just went to school for a long time today. Some of them even worked a job, right? So let's make sure that we're all here, present with one another, and supporting one another, and just be kind, be cool, man, be chill. All right, just some heads up things for you guys to keep track of. Make sure that you're practicing your note taking skills. Is an important part of any study session, right? Make sure you have all the resources. Specifically, make sure you take advantage of the Fiveable Cram Hub that you guys have on your Fiveable login page when you see under My Stuff. Speaking of which, in case you guys haven't seen them yet, here at the bottom of our screen is your slides and your cheat sheet. Please provide some heads up if the slides are incorrect. I'm happy to very quickly handle the slide issue. I have that prepared as soon as possible for you guys if the slides we have aren't working. And then lastly, keep track of the chat, keep track of the Q&A tab. We'll make sure to do our best to support you guys via chat and the Q&A. So make sure you use them accordingly is what I probably should have said. Make sure you use the chat for communicating any issues you might have or any specific issues or any specific sharing of things, but keep the Q&A tab to just content specific questions. Yeah. And then just a quick rundown of our schedule, along with our student host again and myself. Before we really get into it, just want to talk about what happened yesterday. Those any of us joined us, we had an issue where two of our student clients, some of you guys joining us, were not just talkative in the chat, but also very disruptive. Very, we'll just say straight up inappropriate. Keep in mind this is a professional setting. Either you guys paid for it or your parent or guardian paid for you guys to join us here tonight. You guys dropped $10 to $40 for this. Don't waste your money. Don't waste your time. If you're here to study, that's awesome, and we appreciate you guys. Please continue to be engaged and please continue to be active in the chat and talking to us. We'll talk with you guys, but just keep in mind that this is meant to be a setting where we're here to learn and to review content and to practice things. We don't want to make the chat a place of distraction and a place that's really, we'll just straight up say again, inappropriate. I have absolutely no issue banning people from the chat from this presentation and wasting that money and your time. So don't do that, please. Any questions, comments, concerns? Feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll be happy to reply to that. Or sorry, we'll be happy to reply to you with that. Anyways, yeah, we appreciate you guys joining us again. I don't want to waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get the ball rolling. Tonight again, it's gonna be Megan and Tejal taking over, running you guys through some Unit 3 and Unit 4 content. Me, Leah, and Eliza will be in the wings, talking to you guys in chat, answering any questions, here to support you guys if needed. All right, so yeah, appreciate you guys very much. Let's get to it. Good luck, everybody.
Okay, everyone. We're gonna start off with Unit 3. And I know Unit 3 can be kind of daunting just because it's very dense. We were just talking about it before, but it's very dense. There's a lot of terms, a lot of vocab in this unit, and a lot of vocab that you need to be able to apply to real world situations. So that's just something we want to keep in mind when we're going through this. It's important to know the vocab and how to apply it. Okay, and it's going to be 12 to 17% of the exam, which is pretty much like every unit's 12 to 17% of the exam. So just, again, like study all the units, be prepared. Okay, so for 3.1, that's going to be Intro to Culture, and our learning objective here is to define the characteristics, attitudes, and traits that influence geographers when they study culture. Okay, so what is culture? Just going to do a really brief intro to this. Culture is basically everything we learn and share as a group. So it's going to shape how we think, behave, live our lives. Some examples of this could be like food we eat, clothes we wear, like how we use land. And again, like culture is just what makes society unique. I'm pretty sure it's pretty straightforward to most of you guys because, again, you took the course, you spent a year in the course, you know what culture is. Okay, here's some important vocab here. So out of these 5 terms, I'm going to go over all of them real quick, but I feel like the most important one is probably cultural hearth, just because I remember getting a bunch of questions about that on the exam. A lot of different concepts will link to like cultural hearths, so that's definitely something you want to know. So again, culture is going to be like a group's material characteristics, behavioral patterns, beliefs, social norms, and attitudes that are shared and transmitted. A cultural trait, I think that's pretty straightforward. So it's language, customs, beliefs, dress, music, food, technology, and that's going to be like cultural traits could be like visible traits or like quote unquote invisible traits, right? So it's like not like materialistic. A cultural complex is going to be a unique combination of cultural traits for different particular cultural groups. And a cultural realm is going to be a region that's connected by cultural complexes. So that's a little bit more complicated. So these are going to be larger areas that include several regions. So like cultures like within these realms have traits that they share. So that could be like language, religion, etc. Cultural realm, like it's a little more complex. I don't really remember studying it as much for the exam as like the other terms. So if it's a little confusing, I think it's okay, but it's definitely something you want to know. Cultural hearth is going to be a place where new ideas and innovations spring up and spread to other parts of the world. So this could be like fashion in Paris and maybe us following those trends in like the United States, or like a Silicon Valley startup is one that Five will often uses. So yeah, those are like 5 pretty important terms that at least familiarize yourself with. So material versus non-material culture. So material culture is anything that's physical. So clothing, furniture, artifacts, I think that's pretty straightforward. Non-material culture are things that are intangible. So that's things that are called minifacts. So it's going to be customs, traditions, stories, religion, language, and sociofacts. So that's going to be religion, politics, education. So just remember that like non-material culture is just going to be like not physical, well, material is physical. I think that's pretty straightforward for most of you guys, but if it's not, here's the slide, here are the definitions. It's just a good thing to familiarize yourself with, just so you kind of know. Okay, habits versus customs is pretty important. So I think the biggest thing to remember about habits and customs is that habits, those are individual, while customs are going to be with a group of people. So that's like the biggest distinction like that I make. But if you want like the concrete definition, a habit is going to be a repetitive act performed by an individual on a regular basis, and a custom is going to be a shared practice or tradition that is characteristic of a particular group of people. But for me, when I was memorizing it and trying to apply it, I always just remembered custom is group, habit is just going to be individual. Unfortunately, that seems straightforward, but a lot of people get it mixed up from what I've heard. Like they just, when they're taking the exam, they get confused. Don't get confused. Habit, individual, custom, group. Okay, so for some folk customs. So we're going to talk a little bit about like the differences here between like folk and okay, sorry, I got mixed up. We're going to talk about like folk and then pop, like different types of cultures and stuff like that. So for folk customs, a lot of the food is going to be kind of more distinct and less like called like globalized, I guess you could say in a way. So this could be caused by like religious and socioeconomic factors. And an example of this could be like, oh, like in Islam and Judaism, they will prevent the consumption of pork. And like again, food preferences can depend on like wealth, status, and like advertising. And a good term to know is this term called taboo. That's a very good term. That will definitely come up on the exam. And we have a definition for it right here. It's going to be a social or cultural prohibition that dictates like what actions are considered unacceptable within a particular group. Again, very important term. Definitely know the definition of it, if at the very least. It's really important to know that. Okay, so for housing, moving on to that, housing preferences are really going to depend on like the dominant architectural trend at a given time. So a lot of housing for these folk customs are really going to depend on like what the environment's like. What materials are they going to have in the environment? Like, are they going to build out like Thule, for example, right? Or another example here, like, building a brick house might not be feasible in a jungle if that's where the society is, right? So I think that's also pretty straightforward. I can't read that. Okay, go. Is there something wrong with the slide? Okay.
I think you gotta go.
So, governments can worry about social mobility. So, okay. Sorry, let me start over. Governments can worry about social mobility, youth and women empowerment, diversity, like in others, as it may threaten like traditional cultural ideals. So again, like a lot of these folk customs might be a little detached from like maybe what is generally kind of like dictated or accepted, like globalized. So it might be a little different. And also for these folk customs, like maybe they ban popular news outlets or they'll limit freedom of speech. Some examples of this, you guys already know, like North Korea is a great example of this concept, and the Soviet Union. And a lot of times, like even if they do try to prevent maybe popular news outlets and stuff like that, there's still gonna be like struggle to avoid that pop culture influence because there's so much globalization going on in our world now. Our world is so connected, so it's gonna make censorship and everything more difficult. Okay, some folk customs, like government-wise, I'm sure you guys all know about Tiananmen Square in 1989. That was when like anti-communist reformers in Beijing, they protested, and if you guys do know about it, like the government reacted very violently and unfortunately killed a lot of people. Another example is Arab Springs in 2011. The government like shut down stuff to prevent broadcasters from like telling people about it. That's another thing. So just knowing, I know Fiveable uses both of these examples in their like review guides and stuff. It's good to have some examples. It's always good to have examples in your back pocket. So it's, if you're like thinking folk, like maybe you think of like folk customs, and just make sure you know like, oh, Tiananmen Square. So in case they ask, I'm not saying they will, but in case they ask on FRQ, or it's like this is an answer choice on MCQ, then you're like, oh, I know exactly what that is. It's a folk that's an example of a folk custom, and therefore that's what I'm gonna write, or that's the right answer. Okay, so now moving on to pop culture. I think we generally know what that is, right? So that's going to be practiced by large groups. It's going to usually originate from a developed region, and usually that region is going to have like wealth, and people there are going to have like very developed societies. We're going to have widespread diffusion through a hierarchy from specific nodes, and yeah, it's going to be like contagious diffusion. Pop culture can also vary from time to time in a given place. But yeah, especially with the effect of the internet with pop culture, everything's going to spread a lot quicker. And yeah, everything's going to just travel a lot faster. And we also have, for example of this, like pop music. It's obviously written for the purpose of being sold to like a large number of people on like a global scale. So they're expecting that people are going to be spread this. They're expecting that this music is going to be spread like all around the world. But yeah. Okay, so local culture, now kind of going over that. An overview of this is that a lot of local culture, so we're thinking like smaller towns, rural areas, it's usually going to be small groups of people. They're going to be relatively isolated. There's not going to be as much change there, probably. A lot of the origins of like traditions and customs are mostly going to be like kind of rooted in that nation or like little community's history. Not very much. They don't really have much like globalized like culture. The physical environment, I think we kind of went over a little bit, but a lot of these societies are gonna kind of connect to like the physical environment. So all their stuff might depend on it. Like kind of we talked about the whole thing with like using resources to build like shelter, something like that. But yeah, it'll depend on like the group. But like for example, in like Scandinavia, like they're gonna use entire logs to build cabins, or like the American Midwest, they're gonna like they use like processed trees into boards, build a frame, and attach boards to it. So it's like it can really vary, but a lot of this local culture, again, it's just what I try to remember is that it's like significantly way, like they're not as connected, it's less globalized, and it's more like individual to like a smaller group of people. Okay, so yeah, pop culture versus local culture. Kind of already went over it. But so pop culture is going to emphasize the new rather than like preserving any old tradition or like custom. So those who follow a local culture are often going to resist the change. So because people who follow the local culture are often going to have like those traditional languages, religions, values, and food. They're going to have their different ways of life. So that's pretty important. But as like the world progresses and moves on, and everything is increasingly becoming more globalized, more of these people from these like folk cult and local culture like communities, a lot of these people are learning about more they're going to be learning about more of the globalized culture, and that's a big deal because like those communities are losing people. So that's also something to think about when you're just thinking about globalized communities in general. For example, in Brazil, for some of the Brazilian like native tribes, like as the population expands to the interior of the rainforest, like many indigenous people are being exposed to outside groups. So many of those young people in those societies are going to continue to integrate into the larger Brazilian society, which basically could threaten like the existence of the local culture, which is an ongoing concern that many local cultures still have today. So another one is a really important point is ethnocentrism, and I definitely remember this coming up on the exam, and it also came up on like my in-class exams too. So ethnocentrism is going to be when people are going to judge others and their way of life from the perspective of their own culture. So that's not good. But ethnocentrism, there's going to be questions about that for sure, whether it be like on an FRQ or if it's like an answer choice on an MCQ. So it's really important that it's really important that you know the term. At the very least, know the definition so that at least you can maybe define it if an FRQ asks you to define it. Or if it's an answer choice on an AP MCQ, then at least you know, like maybe it's going to be something that's immediately going to be a wrong answer that you cross out. So definitely a good thing to know, because I remember that I did not study this term that much as I should have, and I forgot what it meant, and it was on the exam in an MCQ. So just definitely study it. It's one of the more important terms in this unit, I think. And then cultural relativism is when you're going to judge others and their way of life through the eyes of people who live that way. So that's non-judgmental. This is going to be, more accepting and everything like that. Important, but I think it's more important that you know what ethnocentrism means. But you definitely still need to know what cultural relativism is. Can't talk today. Okay, and again, like no one can perfectly be one way or the other. Judgment isn't always negative, and acceptance isn't always positive. And it's like a very complex issue that we're still dealing with today. So that's why another reason why it's super duper important to know for an AP exam, because it connects to the real world now. Okay, you guys will definitely be able to get this. We're gonna have a poll up. Are we gonna have a poll up? Maybe. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. What's the difference between a habit and a custom? So let's go. 2 minutes. We have the music today. Okay. Never mind. You get 1 minute. 1 minute. Okay, and we're going to reveal the answer. Okay, so let me pull up the poll. Pretty much everyone got it right, except I believe like 4 people. But again, a habit is different than a custom, because a habit is going to be individual, custom is going to be group, right? So that alone, just knowing that little bit, is going to help you answer this question. They cannot be used interchangeably. Make sure that you iron that into your head, that it's like those are different terms. They're not interchangeable. And again, C is like the opposite. That's not correct. And then D, no, that's wrong too. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Habit, individual, custom is going to be group. And as long as you can remember that, you're usually fine. Here's another practice MCQ. How does folk culture vary compared to pop culture? You get 1 minute. We're working with AP style. Okay, we're gonna reveal the answer. Okay, so again, folk culture is gonna vary from place to place, while pop culture varies over time within the same place. That's a little bit more, it's a little harder than the last one, but so if we're looking at the other answers, both pop and folk culture fluctuate heavily based on societal trends and fashions. That's not true because folk culture is going to mostly stay the same. Because they're not really going to have like the globalization influence as much as pop culture will. For C, pop culture remains unchanged regardless of location or era, whereas pop culture adapts with changing times but stays geographically constant. That's not always true with the whole geographically constant thing. So that's also incorrect. Pop culture. That's not gonna be true. D is also not gonna be true. So just B is gonna be the most accurate. This question is definitely harder than the last one. That's why it's really important to read each answer very carefully. You're gonna be very stressed on the exam. It's gonna be very like, they're going to be like, okay, now we're going to start this portion. And because it's your guys' first time, most of you guys taking your first AP exam, it's going to be stressful. You need to make sure you can kind of take a breath and make sure you read the wording very clearly because they will try to trick you because they're kind of mean. They're going to try to trip you up with the wording of the exam. So just make sure you read each one carefully because the wording in this question specifically can trip people up. Just be careful. Okay, 3.2, cultural landscapes. Our learning objective here is to describe the characteristics of cultural landscapes. Okay, so again, some more vocab. I will say, I think on this slide, the most important one might be sequent occupants, because I remember that being on the exam. I remember that term. But sequent occupants, adaptive strategy, symbolic landscape, I think those three are a little bit harder to grasp and memorize. So just keep that in mind. Our cultural landscape is obviously going to be structures within the physical landscape caused by human imprint and human activities. Pretty straightforward. Cultural ecology is going to be a study of how the natural environment can influence a cultural group. I think that's also pretty straightforward. Also, the term name is also pretty straightforward. Yeah, so sequent occupants is going to be a little harder. And sequent occupants is basically, so each group of inhabitants are going to leave their distinct imprint on the landscape, and successive societies shape and form like a geographical place, contributing to the cultural landscape. An example of this is like the Hagia Sophia in Turkey. And then adaptive strategy, also very important. For adaptive strategy, you're looking at the ways humans adapt to the physical and cultural landscape they are living in. That's really important. That's kind of showing how humans interact with the landscape. That is a very important term that will definitely come up on MCQ and possibly FRQ. Symbolic landscape is going to be a place that has meaning beyond its appearance because of cultural associations. So an example is like the Temple Mount in Jerusalem has like religious significance for Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and holds the remains of the ancient Jewish temple and medieval Islamic mosque. So these 5 terms, very important. Make sure we know them, and you can answer questions about them. A little bit more on the cultural landscape. Any and every part of culture affects landscape. So it's going to be gender, religion, language, industrialization. It's a lot of things. The cultural landscapes basically encompass all human-made changes to the natural environment. So architectural styles, like within the cultural landscape, are going to reflect cultural influences. So you can also think about like traditional versus like modern buildings. Like clearly there's a difference there. You can kind of analyze that with the cultural landscape. Culture and physical features sometimes intertwine, especially regarding religion. So that's really important to keep an eye out for, especially like churches and things like that. And generally, cultural landscapes are going to work around physical features, not against them. An example of this is like that national parks are going to preserve unique environments, which are physical features, and that reflects a cultural value. Okay, and here's like a random Simpsons clip for a break.
Great! We asked Frank Gehry to build us a concert hall.
Bill. Snoopy stationery.
Dear Mr. Gehry, would you please build a concert hall for our town? We may not be the biggest city or the prettiest, but we were the first city in America to abandon the metric system.
Frank Gehry, you're a genius. Behold, the new Springfield Concert Hall. And none of this would have happened if not for a letter I received from one little girl.
I wrote that letter.
You wrote I was the bestest architect in the world?
Well, aren't you?
All in favor of building a $30 million screw you to Shelbyville?
Aye!
Get off my masterpiece, you punks. I'll call your mothers.
Yo, Frank Gehry, like curvy linear forms much?
Ah!
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Great!
Okay, so gender and geography. We're going to take a quick look at this. So, with this awesome picture of Barbie on the right. So, popular culture. So, challenges, a lot of popular culture today is going to challenge traditional gender roles, leading to a decline in the patriarchy and a rise in feminist ideas. So, the gender gap. This is going to refer to the difference in opportunities and power between men and women. In less developed countries, we're going to see high maternal mortality rates, and female infanticide are like more common in those less developed countries because there's going to be less resources. Healthcare is not going to be as advanced. We also are going to see different levels of equality again between men and women. So that's really important to note. Women's suffrage, that's also very important. It's women's suffrage. Suffrage is obviously going to be the right to vote. And unfortunately, it's a recent development in most countries. So that's also something you want to keep in mind. And there's also still gender imbalances. Those are going to exist. So a gender imbalance is when there's more men in a country than women, or something like that, or the opposite. Just it's a gender imbalance, which means there's more of one gender than the other. That's going to exist in some highly populated regions, and that could be an effect of anti-natalist policies. So example of like an anti-natalist policy was when like China had their like one-child policy that caused a gender imbalance. Okay, gendered spaces. One like a gendered space is like an area in which particular genders are welcome and others are unwelcome. So some consequences of this are ultimately like how social systems like maintain the organization of gender, and it kind of reinforces like particular ways of being a man or being a woman. Kind of just that's bad, and they can maintain relationships between men and women. So it's kind of it has different people have different opinions about it, but it's definitely something that's ongoing now. Ethnic enclaves, we kind of went over these types of things yesterday, but these ethnic enclaves are going to be clusters of people of the same culture, but surrounded by people of a culture that's like dominant in the region. So an example of this is obviously going to be San Francisco's Chinatown. Another example could be like in Los Angeles, where I am currently right now. There's Koreatown, there's Little Tokyo, we have Little Armenia. So like just those. And these sometimes reflect the desire to stay apart from the larger society, and other times it might reflect the dominant culture's desire to segregate them. They'll often contain stores, religious institutions, signs, or architecture that like will reflect the culture, and it can also provide a buffer from discrimination. Okay, 3.3, moving along, cultural patterns. Our learning objective here is going to be to explain patterns and landscapes of language, religion, ethnicity, and gender. Okay, scales of cultural variation. We have regional level. Looking at it from a regional level, so religious groups can be concentrated in specific regions. So an example of this are like the Baptists. They're going to be the most common religious group in specifically the southeastern United States. If we're looking at a more state level, so we're looking at scales of analysis here now. State level, we're going to kind of see a similar pattern usually. Not always true, but often usually. For instance, like most residents in South Carolina are going to identify as Baptists. If we're looking at a county level, though, we can see like even more specific variations. So one county might have higher concentrations of Lutherans than any other religious group. When you look, when you go from like a state level to a county level, you will be able to draw many different conclusions that like you could not draw from the state level. Language and cultural landscape. So language and cultural identity are intertwined, which is a very important thing that you guys should all know. They're intertwined, they go hand in hand. Often language is going to affect cultural identity. Cultural identity is going to affect language. So an example are the native Hawaiians are reliant on fishing and have a rich vocabulary for fishing nets. Also signage too. These can reflect like linguistic heritage. So some places are going to have like single language signs, like the United States obviously is just going to say like stop in big huge letters. But others are going to have these bilingual signs. So like Belgium and Quebec, for example, on the right here, they're going to have like, this is like 3 different languages. That's really, that shows linguistic heritage, which is also really important to note. Okay, and here is an AP style MCQ. The difference between this question and the ones we've had previously in this stream currently is that these AP style MCQs, these are more characteristic of what you'll actually get on the exam. The others are more just like knowledge questions. These are the AP style ones. So it might be a little bit harder. Just try your best. And I think we're going to do 1 minute. Yes, going with AP style. Okay, and we will reveal the answer. Okay, it's going to be D, and practically everyone got it right. 98.25 people got it right. Awesome. So I think this question is a little bit of an easier question if you do kind of know this concept. So the hallway sign is part of a countrywide educational program for language learning. That's obviously not going to be true. We never learned about that, right? The highway sign alerts drivers as they near an international border crossing station. No, that's not true. The highway sign symbolizes strong political differences within the regions of the country. No, it doesn't. So it's going to be D, because obviously they have two languages on there. We just talked about how if there's like specific like language history, they're going to put two languages on there. So this answer D, the highway sign is representation of the state's multilingual ethnic cultural heritage. That is going to be the correct answer. Good job, guys. Okay, toponyms. So toponyms are going to be place names, and they're going to offer insights into a culture's history and values. And so these are 6 of them. So one of them is going to be descriptive names. So this is directly going to describe a physical feature. So this is pretty straightforward, like Rocky Mountains. Possessive names, that's going to specifically indicate ownership by like a person or a group. To honor, this could also be used to honor like historical figures, so like Martin Luther King Jr. streets in the U.S., stuff like that. Manufactured names are going to be created as entirely new names, often combining words. So, for example, like Truth or Consequence, New Mexico. It could also be related to an incident, and it could be named like after a specific event that happened there, like Battle Creek, right? Like that one right there, named after an incident. Commandatory names, they're going to be using positive words to promote a place. So like Paradise Valley, Arizona. Or a mistake name, which is like crazy, right? That's going to result from errors in translation or identification. So example is Lasker, North Carolina. This is just kind of showing us different names of like these random places that have, this one has a really long name, this has a weird name, that also has a weird name, just a bunch of different types of toponyms that exist. Okay, so centrifugal and centripetal forces. If you have the right method to remember these, it is easy to remember them. So centrifugal forces are going to divide groups, and that could be like ethnic conflict, poverty, dictatorship, religious intolerance, etc. And centripetal forces, that's going to unite groups. So ethnic tolerance, economic equity, strong legal systems, shared language, anything like that. So my teacher actually told us to do this too. But if you look at the wonderful emoji we have in front of the centrifugal forces, that is very like representative of that term. So because centrifugal has the letters F and U in it, you can think about like FU, that's like negative, and it's going to obviously divide people. If you say FU to your friend, like they're not going to like that. It's going to probably cause a fight in the friendship or whatever. So that's going to drive people apart, and that's how like a lot of people do remember that centrifugal is kind of the dividing one, and centripetal is like the uniting one. Okay, so looking a little deeper into centrifugal forces and culture, in terms of religion, we're going to see, like, obviously throughout history, like there's going to be a lot of religious differences, and that is honestly a major source of division and conflict. So we have like the sectarian conflict between the Sunni and Shia Muslims in the Middle East. That's a really strong example. That is something you should definitely know for the exam, because they might bring it up. That whole conflict, it's really important to know. In terms of language and centrifugal forces, We're going to have a lot of language barriers. There's so many languages in the world. There's going to obviously be misunderstanding and miscommunication. That could obviously lead to feelings of separation because just like you don't speak the same language, there's going to be some misconnection there, right? So, or if there's a country and it's bilingual, there's a lot of like us versus them mentality, which is also really important to know. Like that language could cause that. Ethnicity, ethnic tensions can arise from feelings of competition for resources, cultural dominance, or historical grievances. So even things from history that happened, people still are not happy about that. So one example of this is the conflict between the Kurds and the Turkish government. That conflict is fueled by that ethnic identity issue. So that's definitely that with the conflict between the Kurds and the Turkish government. Also good. It's something good that you should know for the exam. It's good to know about it, again, to keep everything kind of straight in your brain. It's very important. An ideology, we're going to have very clashing ideologies with the centrifugal forces, right? So it doesn't even matter, like it could be political, economic, social. It can be highly divisive. It can honestly just be anything, but it's gonna really separate people. Like if they don't have the same, like if they don't think the same way, it's gonna drive them apart, most likely. Centripetal forces. Centripetal forces, again, that's bringing people together. So for religion, like a shared religion in a country or other area, it can be like very strongly unifying, and that's gonna they're gonna have a sense of community, togetherness, and shared values. For example, like Hinduism in India transcends regional and caste differences, providing a common ground for a diverse population, which can be really helpful, making people feel like they're included, and it can help happiness and everything like that. Language, a common language, also is going to allow for clear communication. It's also going to foster that sense of shared identity in the country. So think about, like, obviously these countries with one language, they're going to have easier like ways to contact each other, talk to each other. We're going to have they're going to be able to facilitate like easier integration of immigrants, and they're going to be able to strengthen like national unity a little bit easier. Nationalism, we're going to have obviously a sense of national pride, and shared history can create a strong sense of like we versus them, so that it like provides unity like within the nation. However, nationalism can also have like negative consequences if it turns into feelings of superiority towards other cultures. That's a pretty big problem. Relates to ethnocentrism. And common traditions and holidays, shared customs, festivals, celebrations, those can create like overall a sense of belonging, and obviously they're going to strengthen social bonds. Thanksgiving in the US, for example, that's obviously a national holiday for us, and it's going to bring people together, like regardless of background. Everyone like sits down, enjoys a meal. Yeah. Okay, mechanisms of cultural diffusion. So learning objective here is to define the types of diffusion. So I think someone was asking in the chat earlier about diffusion. Here we go. So our relocation diffusion is going to happen when people migrate and bring their cultural practices with them. So that's when people like physically move, right? So one example is like Italian immigrants arriving in the US in the late 1800s, and they're bringing their pizza making skills from their cultural hearth, right? Bringing the vocabulary term into this, which is going to be, the original source or birthplace of a specific culture and its traits, which obviously was Italy. And since they brought that to the US, they brought this new food to the land. That's relocation diffusion. So looking at it from if we're looking at it kind of attaching scales of analysis to this, relocation diffusion can occur on a small scale, so like pizza in the US, or a large scale. So we're talking about like European culture spreading globally after the 15th century. And cultural traits can stick around in their new home, even after fading away in their original source. So like an example of this is like disco music, which was kind of went away in the US, but it's still like popular, very, very, very popular in places like Egypt, as opposed to like, maybe it's just lingering here, not as much. Okay, expansion diffusion. So expansion diffusion is the spread of cultural traits through through various forms of exchange without people physically moving. This is very important. So no physical movement here. Expansion diffusion, we have different types of expansion diffusion. Contagious diffusion is one type. So that this is like a cultural wildfire. That is a very good analogy. A trait's going to be spreading rapidly outwards from its source through direct contact. So this could be like blues music, originating in the southern U.S., is spreading northward as musicians shared and played the music in different cities. So that's a very good example. Hierarchical diffusion, relocation diffusion can occur on a small scale, again, be it on the U.S., or a large scale. European culture is spreading globally after the 15th century. So that relates to, that's basically hierarchical diffusion. Reverse hierarchical diffusion is, I don't remember that coming up on my exam. It's good to know because it could come up on yours, but it's, yeah, good to know. So this is obviously the opposite of hierarchical diffusion. So cultural traits can sometimes flow from less powerful or marginalized groups to more powerful ones. And for example, like tattoos were once associated with like lower social classes, but have become like way more mainstream and globalized over time, as we know today. Stimulus diffusion is all about borrowing ideas and adapting them. So a culture might adopt like a general concept from another culture, but modify it to fit their own beliefs or needs. So for example, like a McDonald's in India, like the McDonald's restaurants in India, those are going to have vegetarian Big Macs because many people in India, a lot of the individuals there do have vegetarian diets. So it's obviously adapted to the country's needs. Okay, and there's obviously we're going to have obstacles to this diffusion. It's not going to, most things don't diffuse like perfectly smoothly. There's going to usually be like some barriers that can slow down or prevent cultural diffusion. So physical barriers, mountains, oceans, or deserts, those can make cultural exchange difficult. That's pretty straightforward. Distance decay. This term is very important. It's very important. It will definitely come up on the exam in an MCQ or FRQ. And the whole concept is the farther away that a place is from the source of a cultural trait, the less likely it is to be adopted. It is pretty straightforward, but it's definitely something that you need to make sure you can memorize and apply. Age differences. So younger generations are going to often be open to new ideas more than older generations. That's because younger generations are often exposed to more ideas, more viewpoints, and are often, more accepting and will take different ideas into account. Language barriers. Communication difficulties can hinder the spread of cultural traits. That's, I think, also pretty straightforward because we kind of talked about language already. And political boundaries. Closed borders or restrictions on communication can obviously slow down diffusion, which we kind of did see like through like the COVID-19 closures and stuff, how like people obviously, we probably didn't see as much like cultural diffusion then. Okay, more obstacles to diffusion. We're going to have religious beliefs. So strongly held religious beliefs can obviously make people resistant to adopting cultural elements that contradict their faith. That's really important. That's also caused many conflicts and stuff throughout history, which you guys obviously know. Economic differences. If people can't afford like the latest new like technology or product, like diffusion will be limited. A little less more in our world now. I feel like a lot of people have a ton of money, but definitely that's going to be an obstacle. Local culture as well. So a lot of this like desire to preserve traditions that can make people resistant to outside influences and like overall like modernized and globalized culture. And regulations, we're going to have government restrictions like internet censorship, North Korea and the Soviet Union, that can limit cultural exchange, which is pretty important. Okay, AP style MCQ. And okay, you guys can read this out, and we're gonna have 1 minute. Taboos. Okay, and we're going to reveal this answer. Okay, awesome. I think, yeah, most people got it right, about 85%. Just by, like, most of these, if they're fashion trends, a lot of fashion trends are often hierarchical. So that's automatically going to take out A. So a fashion trend was started when an actor appeared on a television show wearing a shirt and tie of the same color. Within weeks, people began to follow this trend in both large cities and small towns across the United States. Which pair of diffusion types explains the spread of the fashion trend in this example? So because it didn't say that he went anywhere or anything, we're also going to take out C. So we're left with B and D. And because it's spreading pretty rapidly, that diffusion I believe is going to be contagious, just because people are beginning to follow this trend in both like large cities and small towns. So that's just more and more people kind of getting involved in that trend, right? That's going to be contagious diffusion, not stimulus. Okay, historical causes of cultural diffusion. Our learning objective here is to explain how historical processes impact current cultural patterns. Okay, so pidgin languages. This is really important. Simplified communication systems. These are basically simplified communication systems that develop when speakers of different languages need to interact. So some characteristics of this are going to be limited in grammar and vocabulary. It's not going to be a native language for either group. There's going to be no native speakers, and that's kind of like the basic guidelines of it. So, example, there's a trade language in Papua New Guinea combining English and the English and Papuan languages. That's very important. Creole language, that's going to be basically an evolved pidgin language when they become the new native tongue of a new generation. So characteristics, I'm going to go through these really quickly. They're going to develop a more complex grammar and vocabulary than pidgins. They're going to function as a complete language, have native speakers who learn language as their first language. For example, in South Africa, they're going to have a language called Afrikaans. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. I apologize. And that's going to mix Dutch, European, and different African languages. So that's really important to note. That it's also important to know the difference between pidgin and Creole languages. A lot of people confuse those. Remember, basically, a pidgin is like a pidgin language evolves into a Creole language. So pidgin languages would come first. Another example is in Swahili. They developed in this Swahili language. It developed in East Africa from trade between Arabic-speaking merchants and Bantu-speaking populations. So it's obviously going to be a mix of Arabic and Bantu languages. It's spoken widely in Africa, and it's the official language in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Okay, lingua franca. This is a very important term. You want to make sure you have this one down. So, lock in. A common learned language used for communication by people with different native languages. That's a lingua franca. So English is going to be a lingua franca. Lingua francas are often used in the whole world for globalization, technology. Multinational corporations that are often based in the US and the UK are going to use English for international business. They're also used widely in science, aviation, journalism, and the internet. A lot of these movies and TV shows are going to be in English, obviously. But unfortunately, a lot of people do view the dominance of English as a whole as cultural dilution. Some other lingua francas that exist in our world: Arabic, Spanish, French, Swahili, Russian. Those are a few. Just a lot of these languages that are very globalized and used in many different affairs. Okay, another AP style MCQ. We're going to start that now with a minute, I believe. Okay, so this one, let's reveal the answer. Okay, so this is going to be A. This is of a longer question. It's going to be a little bit intimidating for sure because a lot of these answers are going to be more history based. So it's really important just pay attention to the wording. Remember like your historical knowledge and try to answer these to the best of your ability. So the Arabic word Swahili means a language of the coast. Which of the following explains how this would relate to the Swahili language? Is language spoken today in Kenya, Tanzania, and northern Mozambique in Eastern Africa. And then I think Hector is going to give some insight to this one.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting y'all. Sorry for all the switching around of the visuals. Anyways, I just wanted to drop in because my students, where I teach at daily, talk a lot about how the language part of this unit really throws them off. Like I mentioned this earlier in the chat, I'm not sure if you saw, but teaching languages and religion in Unit 3 is one of the hardest parts of this class. You know, even coming from the teacher side, right? I'm a full grown adult. I went to college and I studied a bunch of stuff that has to do with these kinds of things, and it's really difficult. And so I definitely understand if you guys have trouble where this comes from. So starting back with the question, the Arabic word Swahili means language of the coast, and so we need to figure out which of the following best explains how this would relate to Swahili being spoken today in places like Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Eastern Africa. And so if you look at the answer, as Muslim merchants travel to Africa, they needed to communicate with people living along the coast, right? And in order, in areas of the Indian Ocean, in order to trade, and as a lingua franca developed. And so, this kind of response is one of the responses that when you look at it, it's a question mark. It should immediately be a question mark. Okay, it's one of those things where when you see a question that has almost like something like, for example, the coast. I'm trying to figure out how to word like a phrasing or a specific kind of a keyword like that. You want to look for that kind of word in the multiple choice response, right? The content is only 50% of this question right here. A good key thing to remember while taking multiple choice exams, and this doesn't go for AP Human Geography. Think of this for your exams, your AP exams next year, or AP exams you're taking this year along with AP Human Geo. Think of words you might see. So the fact that Swahili is a language of the coast, and letter A has a response that deals with how the Indian Ocean, right, along the coast areas, that's a question mark right there. Looking at letters B, C, and D. If you look at B, German colonizers needed a language that would unite the people in their colonies. I'll tell you right now, Germany is not coming up with Swahili, dog. All right, Germany is a Germanic language. The root of German is, I mean, and in fact, is a Germanic language. It has to do with, like, if you look at the language roots of a lot of these European languages, they sound nothing like Swahili. And so there would be no connection between German colonizers and creating a language like Swahili, right? So B should be automatic X. C, traders from around the world using countries of coastal Africa to spread not just goods but also various languages. That may be a question mark too, but it's way too vague, right? There's nothing in there that really leads you to think about how did this create Swahili? Like where does Swahili come from when you think about that response? There should not be any connection in your brain. And if there is, you're thinking too vague. You have to think specific when it comes to this question. Letter D. British colonizers found Swahili easy to use and encouraged its use in Africa and Great Britain. I'll tell you this in Unit 4 again, but I'll tell you right now, any colonizer never encourages native language use. Straight up. Never, ever, ever, ever. The closest you might get to is Britain and India, when Britain used the Indian principalities to take over India and, well, I should say South Asia, because it wasn't just India, it was India and modern day Pakistan, modern day Sri Lanka, modern day Burma, modern day Bangladesh. But nonetheless, it's very, 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 very unlikely any European colonizer is like, yeah, go ahead, people I'm colonizing, speak your language that I don't understand. I'll tell you right now, D is straight up X. So between A and C, A has to be the specific choice here because of the connection between Swahili, meaning language of the coast, and the Muslim traders and Muslim merchants in Africa learning to trade along the coast. Um, so yeah, sorry for interrupting. I just really wanted to hop in because I know that this kind of content can be really hard. I didn't want anybody to be confused or anything like that. Sorry for interrupting, Megan. I appreciate everything you're doing. Again, just wanted to help out there. But anyways, appreciate you guys for letting me jump in. I'm gonna go ahead and hop back out. All right. Appreciate everybody.
Okay. Good job, everyone. That one's hard. Okay, colonialism, imperialism, and trade. So historical forces can obviously spread languages and cultures. That's little Yoda right there. So one of these concepts will be obviously European colonialism. From the 1500s, 1900s, they're going to lead. It obviously led to the spread of European languages like Spanish, French, and English, and religion, specifically, obviously, Christianity, to the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Imposition of cultural traits that's going to replace indigenous religions with Christianity. So when the colonialism, like when they would go and try to colonize these other nations, they would basically, like a lot of the indigenous people there, would be forced to switch and convert to Christianity. So then they lose their religions. That's also very important to note. Lasting influences. So the afternoon tea tradition in former British colonies like Kenya and India. So that's something that still lasts. Okay, 3.6, moving along. Contemporary causes of diffusion. Our learning objective here is to explain how historical processes impact current cultural patterns.
Hey y'all. Sorry for jumping in one more time. I just wanted to address some of the questions on the Q&A because I think there's a lot of y'all missing them, and I didn't want to make Megan backtrack too much. But I noticed a lot of y'all are struggling with the difference between Pidgin languages and Creole languages. Just want to reiterate that Creole languages are the evolved form of Pidgin languages. So when you see a Pidgin language, what's happening is you're seeing a bunch of people who have met and have really no connection language-wise come up with like some unique things. A way that I think about it, living in Central Texas, coming from East Texas, I was always around people who spoke Spanish, like myself, people who didn't speak English, right? And so now you have this combination of things called Spanglish, and you have like some words like amigo or like hola, and you have people knowing words like that and creating this sort of pidgin language that we know as Spanglish. But then you get into the finer details like Creole, which is the evolved form, and it might be a more concise form of either language, right? If you're from Louisiana, Creole refers to the Creole language, which is a mixture of indigenous people who were native to the Americas, people who were brought over here as slaves, and the French language. So you have this weird combination there, right? So Creole is an official language. Not necessarily Creole could be an official language depending on who you're asking. Like, for example, in Southern Louisiana, Creole is considered more of an official kind of language, while Pidgin is definitely more of a, like you said, like Sean Nanya, it's definitely more of a mixed language with different groups coming together and stuff like that. So just to wrap up, yeah, things like Ali, I see your question. People will be born into Creole. Absolutely, they can be born into Creole. It's definitely one of those things where it's like its own cultural thing, right? It's like its own individual cultural thing, and it's not found so much anymore nowadays. It's really more of a historical thing because of language being so available with things like Duolingo and education being widely more available. You have access to language just like popping up all the time, and it's easier now. But it's definitely one of those things, right? Okay, again, sorry for interrupting. Just wanted to, yeah, I wanted to clarify. Happy to help. I didn't want to make Megan go double back to 4 different topics, so I appreciate you guys. Sorry for interrupting twice in a row. Good luck, everybody.
Okay, now that's cleared up for everyone. Yeah, just always to make sure to remember it's like the pidgin language. It's pidgin first, and then if it evolves and becomes a Creole, it's Creole, obviously. So just try to remember pidgin before Creole, and it'll help you probably. I think that's a good stepping stone. Okay, contemporary causes of diffusion. Again, our learning objective here is to explain how historical processes impact current cultural patterns. So our causes of cultural diffusion, we already kind of talked about it. So these can all be like, this can be like the internet, migration, urbanization, globalization. All of these are going to contribute to those cultural, like the cultural diffusion and like spread of ideas, traditions, and innovations across the world. So one of these we kind of already talked about it. I think I touched on it a few times, but the internet, obviously, it's basically a giant information superhighway. So we have all this instant sharing of cultural elements like music, fashion, art, ideas. Social media specifically has been like a huge deal. It connects people all over the world from all different places, and that basically fosters that exchange of ideas and experiences. Migration, obviously, that's going to cause cultural diffusion there. That's physical movement of people, different places, the relocation diffusion. And obviously, we're going to have migrants who are carrying their tradition to new places, and that influences the local cultures, and vice versa. They interact with each other. This exchange can be seen, obviously, in cuisine. Like, there's all this food that's like Asian fusion, like things like that. Language, there's like different words borrowed from different languages. Like all of our languages in English, they're going to have roots in like Spanish or some other language, right? And even fashion trends right here for migration. Urbanization, we're gonna have the growth of cities, and that's going to create like melting pots of cultures. People from diverse backgrounds are all going to come together in these really urban areas, and they're going to be sharing ideas and practices. So that creates new hybrid cultures, or maybe there's a dominance of a particular culture over others. It's really important. Globalization, obviously, where they touched on that as well. There's going to be increased economic and cultural interconnectedness worldwide. Pretty straightforward. Global trade, obviously, is also going to kind of going to influence this. It's going to expose people to new ideas, new customs, new products, new media like movies and TV. That's also going to influence culture. That's also going to influence culture as well. Cultural divergence. This is also a very important vocabulary term. So cultural divergence is when a culture separates or goes in a different direction. So a reason for this is that like maybe members of a certain culture move away from the core values of their culture because they have been exposed to other ideas or other a different culture that they want to follow instead, right? So physical barriers. We also might have like this might separate people living in different parts of a cultural region, causing each group to develop differently. That's really important, where it's like each group like living on, like group A living on one side of the mountain and group B living on a different side of the mountain. They might have the same culture, but maybe depending on like what the environment's like, who they talk to, what resources they have, they're going to develop differently. It's like pretty much enough. For example, the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was giant. It covered most of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. And these Germanic tribes attacked the western part of the empire and introduced new cultural elements. And the Western Roman Empire are going to basically adopted a lot of the Germanic influence, while the Eastern Roman Empire fell under the influence of Greek culture, that's an example of like the different like geographic locations and how it can affect different cultural development. Okay, the opposite of this is going to be cultural convergence. So cultural convergence is when different culture is going to actually become similar or even come together and combine. So global culture, based on this, is going to be that cultural convergence is part of what is currently creating a common global culture. Straightforward. Time-space compression. That's also a very important vocabulary term. You might want to note that down, know how to apply it. So time-space compression, that's going to contribute to convergence. It can be caused by like air travel, newspapers, television, telecommunications, the internet, etc. That's also pretty straightforward. We're also going to have this effect on languages. So this can cultural convergence is going to like cause the increase of dominant languages like English, and the unfortunate decrease of a lot of indigenous languages, because a lot of people do shift to learning English and stuff because it's maybe more useful for jobs and stuff like that. We also have the spread of democracy. Like in 1977, there were very few democracies. In the late 1980s and 1990s, democracy grew. So, and many communist dictators fell, and a democratic government replaced them. So this is an example of cultural convergence, like time-space compression and globalization all together in the same category. And if for time-space compression, again, if we're defining it again specifically, this is when things seem closer because of better transportation. So sending a letter could take months, but you can text someone right away. Like you can text someone who's in like Japan right now and they'll get it right away. Okay, moving on. 3.7, diffusion of religion and language. So learning objective here is to explain what factors led to the diffusion of universalizing and ethnic religions. This is a very important topic. Okay, so cultural hearths and diffusion. So cultural hearths, let's like, if we're imagining like a birthplace for cultural elements like language. So languages are originating and developing in these hearths, right, as well as culture. So diffusion, languages are spreading outward from their hearths. Like, so historically, various forces influence the spread, positive forces and negative forces alike. So some positive forces could have been trade, introducing like new languages to different regions, but some negative forces could have been like conquest wars, colonialism, imperialism, and that often forced language, like the language to be learned by a certain group of people, unfortunately. So why do languages spread differently? So the hearth is going to matter. So if we're looking at Mandarin Chinese, so despite being the second most spoken language, it hasn't diffused widely globally, is because China primarily focuses on like the internal growth and didn't establish many colonies. So that's a really important thing to note. Conquest and colonialism. So some of these major languages like English, French, Spanish, and Arabic are going to be spreading extensively due to colonization. With nearly 1.5 billion speakers, English is obviously the most widely used language globally. However, native speakers are concentrated in former British colonies, and English dominance comes from colonization by Great Britain, so the US, Canada, India, Australia, and South Africa. Religion also plays a big role in this. For example, Arabic, the religious language of Islam, benefited from the region's spread. These are all like helpful examples to know. Language is obviously going to reflect culture. Language is crucial for a culture's identity because it provides people with that sense of place and belonging. It ultimately creates that sense of place for its speakers and like shapes their cultural landscape. We also have that impact of technology. So we have lots of like advancements today. Obviously, we're advancing, we're making progress, and communication through technology, that's like such an important way of how we interact. So it can like lead to drastic changes in age-old cultural practices and even languages themselves, which is really important. Language diversity is always at risk these days. So there are about 7,000 languages spoken worldwide, and a lot of languages will often be only spoken by small, like isolated groups. And unfortunately, yeah, half of these languages could disappear by the end of this century, just because of like languages like English, French, and stuff like that. They're becoming more globalized, more widely used, more quote unquote useful for people who want to like work jobs and stuff like that. And that is unfortunate. It's really unfortunate, but it's something that probably will happen. Signage and language landscape. So if we're looking, like, it's very important to like look at how some places display their linguistic heritage. Again, going back to that stop sign example, or just any type of signs on the road. That's a good example of that. And yeah, language and identity intertwined again. A group's language becomes a vital part of their cultural identity. Yeah, so we kind of already talked about the Native Hawaiians, whose like fishing economy, they have a lot more vocabulary for like different fishing nets because of their culture. And the beginnings of language. So scientists called linguistic study scientists basically who are defined as linguistics are going to be studying languages and their paths. So experts believe spoken languages emerged sometime between tens of thousands to a few 100,000 years ago. And it's really unclear exactly how language diffused, but possibilities include people carrying it with them as they migrated. So that's like relocation diffusion. Maybe they learned it from their neighbors. So that's like contagious diffusion. Or like they were forced to learn it. So that's hierarchical diffusion. These are all good things to know. Again, not like this specifically will probably be on the exam. They're not going to ask you about like linguists probably, but again, it's good to know so you can keep everything straight. The language family tree. So linguistics believe that most languages spoken today belong to roughly 15 major language families. So the distribution of language families are going to reflect those like historic human migrations, which basically relocation diffusion, that's migration. The Indo-European language family specifically encompasses around 400 to 500 languages with roughly 2.8 billion native speakers, and it has the most speakers worldwide. Nearly half the population is going to be using an Indo-European language. And physical or cultural barriers can lead to language fragmentation, where a country has many different languages. So, for example, Papua New Guinea holds the record for most languages spoken in one country with over 850. And here's a picture of the language family tree on the right. Okay, language variation. Languages can further branch out into smaller categories, sort of accents, dialects, and isogloss. So for accents, obviously these variations reflect social background or geographic location. Dialects, these regional variations are going to be sharing similarities with the main language but have distinct features, such as like Australian English, British English. That's going to be different than American English. And isogloss, the geographic boundary where a specific language feature appears. That's all. Isogloss, that's a very important term to know. A lot of people forget to study it. It probably will pop up on an MCQ. Okay, and now we have our brain break time.
I would like to buy a hamburger.
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 No. Let's break it down. I would
Would
weird
weird
would
like
to
toi
to
toi
buy
b
a
a
hamburger.
hamburger
Hamburger.
hamburger
Hamburger.
hamburger
Ham.
burger.
I would like to buy a hamburger.
I would like to buy a hamburger.
It's not Damburger. Hamburger.
I'm not saying dimburger. I said I would like to buy a hamburger.
I would like to buy a hamburger.
I would like to buy the hamburger.
Hamburger.
I would like to buy a hamburger.
Maybe we should stop.
We don't quit. We do not quit. Again.
I would like to buy a hamburger.
I would like to buy a hamburger.
I would like to buy a hamburger.
I would like to buy the burger.
I would like to buy a hamburger.
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 Okay, hope everyone enjoyed that. That was super chaotic. I've never seen that before, so. Oh, okay. We'll move on in a second, but almost we're getting close to the end of Unit 3. We have this one, and then we have one more. We have one more topic, and then we are on to Unit 4. Okay, so space and religion. So we're going to first be looking at distance and religion. So religion is going to be more resistant to distance decay than other cultural aspects, rightfully so. So example is that immigrants might adopt a new language but keep their ancestral faith. That's pretty common. It's not as common for people to just switch over unless they're forced to, unfortunately, by like colonialism. Religion's role in shaping landscapes. So religions are going to spread outward from their hearths and contribute to a sense of place and belonging for their followers. And religious practices can influence the cultural landscape. Cultural landscape can also influence religion. So, like specific architecture for certain religious buildings, right here on the right, that's the Sagrada Familia, and that's in a Catholic church. It's a Catholic church. Also, pilgrimages, a religious journey undertaken to visit a holy site. So, examples could be Hindus visiting the Ganges River, or it could be Muslims performing the Hajj to Mecca, and Christians traveling to Rome. Okay, and then here's another AP style MCQ. 1 minute. And drop your answer in the chat.
Hey, homies, I'm back. Came in just to help out a little bit with this question because, again, I wanted to make sure everybody had the right idea. And this question is very difficult, so I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So, really quickly, this image shows the old city of Jerusalem. Which statement best describes the spatial pattern, right, in the cultural landscape, right? And that image right there shows city Old Jerusalem. Old Jerusalem is home to three major buildings, or I should say, structures, right, for three major world religions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So that being said, let's find out the answer real quick. All right, letter C. The image indicates that Muslim and Jewish citizens live in close proximity to each other. So first off, this is going to be kind of difficult because of the color of the image. The black and white doesn't help. But if you notice in the foreground of the image on the right-hand side, technically that is a mosque. And a mosque is actually the religious structure of something happened, visual bug. Okay, cool, we're all good. It did change. Oh, that's not good. But yeah, well, my bad. The answer is definitely C. Nonetheless, the mosque being at the front there, and if you know about Jerusalem being in Israel now, this question has you bring content from history and content from contemporary, modern day, right now, present status quo, whatever you want to call it, right? So, anyways, this answer choice is really all about connecting the history and the answer together. The history and the present together. Looking at the other choices, I see some of y'all focused on. Oh, I got deleted and redone. Appreciate that. But I think I saw a lot of y'all pick A. The image shows the distinctive cultural areas that represent the first world religions. Sorry, the 5 world religions that are practicing close proximity to another in the old city. Again, you have to know a little bit about history here, right? Israel and Jerusalem are not home to religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism. Those do not play an important role in this city, in this area of the world, right? So A, automatically no go. B, the skyscraper shown in the image represents a secular landscape. Again, straight up, if you know anything about Israel and Jerusalem, which you should know right now, It's not secular. It's not a secular country. There's nothing secular about it. And then D, the image shows. Oh, I see now. My fault. Okay, I see why y'all got it. Good to know, Crystal, and I appreciate you guys letting me know. Yeah, I'll go back to C in a second, homies, and I'll explain why A is right again in a second, guys. Going to D real quick. The image shows dispersed residential areas implying Jerusalem is very densely populated. None of that has anything to do with like the culture, right? That's a really Unit 6 question or answer choice, right? That's a Unit 6 response, so we're not there right now. Secular means non-religious. Secular means non-religious, right? So real quick, going back to A, explaining why A is not correct. The image shows distinctive cultural areas that represent the 5 world religions. Again, you have to bring in concepts from your history knowledge and your religious knowledge, and you have to know Israel is not home to religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, right, and Sikhism. They're just not popular there. Jerusalem and Israel are home to religions like Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Right? Without those 3 religions, Israel and Jerusalem aren't the historical important places that they are, right? And then re-explaining why C is correct. The image indicates, same word, that Muslim and Jewish citizens live in close proximity to one another. That has you bring in your historical knowledge. In the foreground of the image, you see here on the right-hand side of the foreground of the image, you can see that is a mosque, right? That is a mosque. You can tell because of the dome shape. So going back to cultural landscape question, going back to our religious studies, you have to know what a mosque looks like in this context, right? And if you know anything about modern day Israel, you know it's primarily a Jewish country, right? A Jewish nation state. Going to some Unit 4 preview. So you really have to take into account all of these ideas into one question, right? And that's really difficult. That's why this is an AP style MCQ. You have to bring in some Unit 3 topics, some Unit 4 topics. You have to understand that D is wrong because it's a Unit 6 topic. We're not even talking about Unit 6 right now. There's so much involved in this question. It's a really, really major deal. All right. So I appreciate you guys letting me come in. Thank you, Megan, for letting me answer that question. Appreciate y'all's questions in the chat. Sorry about the glitch. We worked on these slides for like a month, and I hope they were set. We might have some problems in the future, so we do appreciate y'all's patience in that. All right, let's move on so we can knock out Unit 3 and we go to the cram quiz and we can get to Unit 4 because we only have an hour and a half. I want to make sure we get everything done tonight. All right, appreciate you guys.
Okay, moving on to the next slide. We're almost done. Almost done. Unit 3 is so long. So you guys got this. Thank you for hanging in there with us. Fundamentalism and religious law. So fundamentalism is going to be a strict adherence to a religion's literal interpretation and traditional lifestyle as prescribed in its holy texts. So this can often enforce like a strict dress code, strict gender roles, and it will often limit personal freedoms. Fundamentalism will weaken from the religion's origin or birth. So an example could be like Islamic fundamentalism is strongest in the Arabian Peninsula, but it's a little bit more weak in countries like Malaysia and Indonesia because they're just not as close to that hearth. Religious law. So Sharia, the Islamic legal system is going to be based on interpretations of the Quran. So it's going to be strongest in countries near the Islamic hearth, like Saudi Arabia and Yemen. And that's going to be creating theocracies. And theocracies are governments run by religious leaders based on specifically on religious law. So we're going to see there's going to be, for influence in non-theocracies, even non-theocratic countries show some influence of religion in their legal codes. So an example, like the blue laws restricting Sunday activities in the U.S., that's an example. Personal behavior as well. So religious beliefs often will guide personal behaviors like dress code, prayer practices, and even food restrictions. An example could be like dietary restrictions in Hinduism, like a no beef diet, and Judaism and Islam, where there's no pork in the diet. Classifying religions. Okay, I think I saw some people asking about this before. So there's definitely a lot of little distinctions that we have to make when we're talking about religions. So we have monotheistic, polytheistic, and animistic. So these are pretty straightforward. Monotheistic, I can't talk today. We're worshiping one deity for this religion. So Christianity, Islam, and Judaism all are monotheistic. polytheistic religions worship multiple deities. So like Hinduism is a great example. Animistic is the belief that inanimate objects possess spirits. So some indigenous religions have this belief. Ethnic versus universalizing. This is what I saw this in the chat. Ethnic basically means that it's mostly for like one people group and not actively seeking converts. So it's appealing primarily to a specific group and emphasizing cultural characteristics among their followers. And it's mainly going to be spread through that relocation diffusion, like basically migration. So then again, examples are like Hinduism and Judaism. Universalizing. These religions are actively seeking new converts, and they believe that their faith ultimately holds that universal appeal. And that's going to spread through expansion diffusion, which can be missionary work, and relocation diffusion, which is migration again. So examples of this are Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Baha'i. And Orthodox versus syncretic. So Orthodox, these religions are going to emphasize purity of faith and specifically resist blending with other religions. So that's going to include some Christian denominations. Syncretic religions are going to combine elements of multiple religions, and this can be seen in some indigenous religions. Some important religions to note, we're going to go over them, right? Some are 4 of them, and then we have 3 on the next slide right now. So Shinto, that's going to be an ethnic religion. The hearth is Japan. They're going to be they emphasize like honoring one's ancestors and the connection between people and nature. Buddhism is going to be a universalizing religion. That the hearth is South Asia, which is present-day Nepal, and the diffusion is contagious. So that's East and Southeast Asia, and relocation diffusion is basically worldwide. It was founded by Siddhartha Gautama, which is basically the Buddha. So I think his name, might have came up once on the AP exam last year. I don't entirely remember, but I do remember that name. So you might want to remember the name and how he's like kind of associated with Buddhism. He taught escaping like the suffering through like right views, intention, speech, conduct, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and meditation. And Sikhism is universalizing in regards to that. Hinduism, that's gonna be an ethnic religion. It's very important for all these important religions that you can distinguish like ethnic versus universalizing. It's like a really big thing. They'll definitely ask about that on the exam between these major religions. So the hearth is the Indus Valley River. It's present-day Pakistan. It's a polytheistic religion, but some do consider monotheistic, as they see like the multiple deities as like a manifestation of like one specific god. Also very helpful little tidbit to know. Some of these key beliefs are going to be karma, so consequences of one's actions, and dharma, so that's moral and religious law. And they have the caste system in Hinduism, which is based on karma. Sikhism, that's going to be universalizing religion. Hearth is Punjab, northern India. Diffusion is contagious. And it can also be relocation if we're talking about 20th century migration. It was founded in the 15th century by Guru Nanak, and it combines elements of Hinduism and Islam. And the holy book for this religion specifically is the Guru Granth Sahib. And those 3 other ones, Judaism, that's going to be an ethnic religion. So the hearth is going to be the Eastern Mediterranean and Southwest Asia. Diffusion for Judaism is mostly going to be relocation. That was forced by Romans around 70 CE and to the US and other countries through multiple types of relocation. Judaism is a monotheistic religion with one God, and their holy book is the Torah. It's good for these religions who do have their own holy book. It's good to know like which one is with which religion. They might ask about that. You never know. It's good to just have everything straight in your head. Islam, that's going to be universalizing religion. The hearth is Southwest Asia, which is present-day Saudi Arabia. The diffusion is going to be contagious through trade and conquest, and relocation Diffusion, which is worldwide, obviously. Followers are called Muslims, and they believe Allah, that their God, revealed his teachings through the prophets, with Muhammad being the last prophet. And Jesus is considered like the second most important prophet. And their holy book is the Quran. Christianity, universalizing religion. Their hearth is the Eastern Mediterranean and Southwest Asia. Diffusion is contagious, hierarchical, and relocation. It's founded by followers of Jesus Christ. It's considered the Son of God and Savior of humanity. And Christianity is going to be emphasizing faith, love, and peace. Their holy book is the Bible, and it's split into 3 major branches: Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, and Protestant. And now we have our last AP style MCQ on the next slide.
Hey, y'all, I'm back.
1 minute.
Back because I love these religions so much. Let's talk about them after you guys have a minute to check it out. Got the poll up for y'all. Very good. Let's do it. 1 minute. Memorize locations. Tough one. I would say it's really good to memorize the hearth. Maybe don't worry so much about remembering the initial point. If you're thinking about Judaism and Christianity and Islam coming from Southwest Asia, like Kevin Turner. I don't think I do. I just mean they'll probably bring up with Israel Palestine conflict, bring up a lot of it, like environmentally, it's like provide housing and stuff, like adaptation there. All right, so that was our 1 minute. Sorry, Parker. I'll double back on those questions in a second after we go over this question. So, our response to this question is letter A, and the polls were A, 90%. Well done, those of us that voted. Well done, good job. Let's talk about this one really quickly. So, across the Islamic world, despite different cultures and architectural styles, common features can be seen in mosque architecture. Which of the following explains the diffusion of Islamic architecture worldwide? This question, or I should say better yet, this response, is based on you guys knowing about the Islamic caliphates. Just really quickly in the chat, just tell me a yes or no if you've heard of any, or have you at least heard the word caliphate? And if so, do you guys know about any of the Islamic caliphates? That's a little bit of world history for you. I'm sure people like Leah and Tejal taking that class might be familiar with that. Yeah, Ali too, right? Taking world history right now. So the Islamic caliphates are basically a long time ago when Islam first started. Yeah, you'll definitely pick it up in world history. You had a bunch of what's called a caliphate, which is essentially like a kingdom. I don't want to make it necessarily the same thing, but essentially it's a kingdom of Islam, right? And over the course of close to like 2,000 years, maybe 1,500 years, there were like 3 different caliphates. Over time, these caliphates spread all the way from Southwest Asia, all the way across South Asia, even going as far into countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, which is why Indonesia is predominantly a Muslim country, even though Islam started way over here on mainland Asia. So that being said, you have to keep track of that history in the back of your head, right? To know a little bit about how Islamic architecture spread across the world, right? That's why on the map you can see Bosnia and Malaysia there. Or sorry, the image, you see Bosnia and Malaysia right there, and how Islam spread across the world. So it's one of those things, and Spain, very good, Sylvia. It's really, really one of those things you have to bring in your history, right? But yeah, while Leah's right, definitely don't stress. It's one thing that, it's just about practice, practice, practice. If you don't know, it's not the end of the world. You got to kind of bring that up as you go through the exam. All right, cool deal. Let's finish up Unit 3, guys. We can do our cram quiz, take a quick break, and then we can go to Unit 4. We're almost through the evening, guys. We got to keep focused, stay locked in. Appreciate you guys.
Okay, guys, I'm going to be taking over for the rest of the night, so let's go straight into topic 3.8, which is effects of diffusion. So your learning objective is going to be how to explain the processes of diffusion results in changes to the cultural landscape. but some essential things you need to know are acculturation, assimilation, syncretism, and multiculturalism. Okay, so we're going to talk about the results of cultural interaction. Cultural interaction is basically just multiple different cultures coming in contact with each other, sharing, aspects of the culture, like, sorry, I'm blinking, but it's two cultures coming together. So results, you're going to have acculturation, assimilation, syncretism, and multiculturalism. So we first have acculturation, and this is when the minority group, like the smaller culture in an area, is going to take some aspects of, a bigger culture, the dominating culture, while still maintaining some of their own traditions. So the example here, we have a Danish family in Iowa adopting American names while keeping Danish food traditions. Now, this is perfect because they're taking some of that dominant culture, using those American names, but also keeping some of their own culture by using those Danish food traditions. Then we have assimilation. When I think of assimilation, I always think of the word assimilate, which is kind of like go all the way. And it kind of means where the minority group is going to lose its cultural identity and move all the way into the dominant culture and what they believe in. So example of this is grandchildren of Indian immigrants potentially losing language and daily food traditions, but maintaining religious practices. This is like super common. I know for myself, my grandparents are Indian, and a lot of the culture and aspects of it, I'm losing because I'm assimilating into American culture. While I have still some of those aspects, a lot of it is going to be gone. And obviously, complete assimilation is going to be rare. You're still going to have, some aspects of that culture, but most of the time, you're going to lose most of it. And then we have syncretism, which is the blending of elements from different religions and cultures into like a new belief system. The example that Five uses is the Brilliant movement, but I always like to think of the religion of Sikhism. Sikhism is like syncretism between, Islam practices and Hinduism practices. So it's a perfect example of a religion that comes from syncretism. And then finally, we have multiculturalism. This is like the best thing, guys. This is what we should be striving for. It's basically when all of these cultures can coexist and they have respect on each other's cultures and beliefs, and they all value each other. And there are a few benefits and challenges. Benefits, it enriches lives through cultural exchanges, and challenges, you're going to have a lot of conflicts like prejudice, racism, and other things that we're going to talk about in the next couple of slides. So let's talk about some positive aspects of cultural interaction. So again, cultural interaction is two cultures coming together, and cultural diffusion is basically the spread of elements from one society to another. And this can create a lot of new different cultural aspects like fusion cuisine, hybrid art forms, and multilingualism. Fusion cuisine is taking some ingredients from one culture and ingredients from another culture and creating a new cuisine. Like I know in my town, we have curry pizza, which is taking like Indian curry and pizza, and it's basically the best pizza ever. So without cultural diffusion, we wouldn't be able to have that. Then you're going to have hybrid art forms, which is just like different artistic styles and making them into something new and different. And then finally, multilingualism, which is just people adopting and using languages from other cultures. And one great thing that comes from cultural interaction is increased knowledge and understanding. So when, as a society, we see other beliefs and other things that are, different from our own, we get this really cool idea and understanding, and we learn about their values and beliefs and their customs and traditions. And it also helps a lot with problem-solving techniques because we're able to see both perspectives. We're able to see one culture and their ideas, and then your own culture. So a lot of the times those problems are going to be solved way quicker and better done. Okay, going along, I wish cultural interaction only had positive effects, but we're also going to have a lot of negative aspects of cultural interaction, and those things usually come with like nativism and xenophobia as well as racism. So nativism and xenophobia is fear and hostility towards immigrants or outsiders. So specifically nativism, it's kind of like when the native-born people are going to oppose immigration and they don't really want other people from other countries coming into their own country and kind of taking their culture and their background. And then we have xenophobia, which is basically just prejudice prejudice against people from other countries. So an example that we see is anti-Catholic settlements in the US during the 1800s and early 1900s, because a lot of times, those people in the US didn't really want those Catholic people coming in and taking their religion. Then we have institutionalized racism. So we all know what racism is, but institutionalized racism is basically when racism and prejudice becomes part of the legal system and the government system, and it kind of becomes, some main rules. An example of this, just a perfect example, is the apartheid in South Africa. We learn a lot about this in AP World History, and it's basically where, the color of your skin, a lot of racism goes into your education rights and your economic status. And a lot of this, so racism really just goes into play with, how people work in their lives and their social status. Okay, so we're going to review a little bit from topic 3. We learned about how the concept of cultural landscape illustrates the interactions between humans and their environment, how globalization, the internet, and urbanization have influenced cultural diffusion, how colonialism, imperialism, and trade have contributed to historical patterns of cultural diffusion, how expansion diffusion and relocation diffusion are similar and different, and how the effects of technology on cultural patterns today, how they've changed compared to the past. So I want you guys to think about those questions. Maybe pop some questions in the chat if you're having any issues with it, and I think Hector's going to talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, guys, I want to hop in here real quick just to use this slide as a quick moment for us to reflect on this unit. We've been doing a lot of lecturing for the last hour, just about, no, last 2 hours almost. Yeah. Unit 3 is super dense. So just a quick reflection. Some of the key points that I want you guys to remember about this unit are things like cultural landscape, globalization, all those bolded words. Some of that key important vocab is like the really, really important stuff, right? And so when you guys are talking about stuff like, I see like y'all really focusing on the Unit 6 stuff, things like redlining and blockbusting, that's important. But focusing on the Unit 3 content, the things like how did we even get there, right? How did we get to that level of blockbusting, of redlining, all those issues in our urban areas, has to do with culture. Right, culture is what started it all. So as we really get to the nitty gritty of things like Unit 6 and Unit 5, think first Unit 3, Unit 2, right? Even Unit 1. This is the foundation for that kind of stuff, right? So we won't spend too much time on this for sake of getting into the rest of our lessons, because we want to get to the all of Unit 4 before we end tonight. Unit 3 being so dense, if you guys have our slides open, you'll see Unit 3 is 70 slides and Unit 4 is only 30 slides. That's how dense Unit 3 is. So we're going to go ahead and do a small portion of our Unit 3 cram quiz just to review a little bit, just to kind of get some stuff going. And then we're going to jump into Unit 4, and we're going to make Unit 4, it might be a little bit quick, but we want to at least do our best to review that vocab, review those content areas, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start up our Unit 3 cram quiz. Let me quit sharing our slides, and let me start sharing our Unit 3 cram quiz. That should be the correct one. Here we go, Unit 3 cram quiz, perfect. So right here at the bottom of your screen, where it once said find your slides and cheat sheets, it's now going to say Unit 3 cram quiz. That should be the correct link. Or if I zoom in a little bit, this should work because I know how to use technology. You should be able to scan that QR code. I'll zoom back out just so it's not so tight on that screen. But you should be able to scan that QR code with your phone. We're going to do our Unit 3 cram quiz and get that started. Again, we won't be able to spend too much time on this because we want to be able to get, and we will do a short break after this, Aaliyah, just to give you guys a quick stretch. We needed to, right? We've been sitting down with you guys. We've been doing a lot of talking with you guys. We want to make sure we get a quick break in as well. We'll put the link in the chat for you guys. Give me 1 second to copy it one more time. And here's the link really quick. Hey, thanks, Tejal. Appreciate you for doing that ahead of me. Cool deal. And when we go through this, Megan, Tejal, free to hop in with any comments that you guys might have when we do the quiz as well. All right, give y'all a couple more. I see there are 92 of us in the presentation, about 67 of you guys signing up. I want to get started here in the next couple of seconds, so feel free to just join as we go. Let's zoom back out just so, again, it's not so tight on the screen, but feel free to zoom back out as you need to. Actually, I think that should be good. So the question's not
I
so
think
small.
I also just saw a comment like maybe earlier like talking about watches and stuff for the exam.
Yeah.
It definitely helps to have an analog watch. So that's just a normal watch that's no like digital anything, just like the one that has like the classic clock face on it with the actual clock. um that
There we
really
go, guys.
helps because I remember when like my first year taking an AP exam for some reason my school, oh sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good, Megan. You're perfectly fine. I think you're absolutely right to bring that up.
Yeah.
It's really
But my
important.
school, yeah, my school for my first AP exam I took AP Spanish, and they didn't have a clock in the room, so like no one could tell where we were. But luckily, I had a watch, so just in case your school doesn't provide a clock, and it's also just good to have, so you don't have to keep looking up because they'll often have like a projection of like a clock or something. But like, it's helpful to have your own little watch just in case, and it's also good if any of you are planning to take like the if any of you are planning to take the SAT or the AACT, you're also going to want a watch because they often might not have like the time always available to you.
Remember, we can't hear the music. I even had volume up all the way. So sad. All right, let's go ahead and reveal the answer. I know we're not all answered yet, but I want to make sure we get some questions in before we take our break. So I'm going to reveal the answer. 3, 2, 1. So what is likely to happen when two societies with distinct languages interact frequently? Development of pidgin language and Creole languages. Very good, guys. Very good. This was a little bit of an easy one, right? If you look at the answers, it doesn't really make sense to pick some of the other ones. Respectfully, the conflict of land use is probably the second best choice. I can't blame you for picking C. But B and D doesn't really line up just quite yet. A being the most apparent is a good job. Is a good choice. Well done, guys. All right, let's go on to the next question. Hey, there's the music. Wonderful. We just went over that vocab word. Went over that vocab, right? Assimilation. What does that mean? What does that mean? Is it the same thing as acculturation? I don't know. Yeah, smartwatches are not the move. I would say Apple Watches are not okay because of the smartwatch capability. Just never like the test coordinators don't allow it. I think College Board says specifically no smartwatch either. Anything that has internet access is always against the rules. Maybe you have something on your Apple Watch that has some kind of note-taking ability. Photos app is a good point. DR, yeah. It's a good question, Parker. I don't know. I would say it really depends on the testing security that your school does. But yeah. All right, that's most of us here. We're going to go ahead and real answer in 3, 2, 1. Hey, look at that. We're getting some good numbers here. So an example of assimilation meaning cultures mixing together, right? Everybody's mixing together. In particular, immigrants adopting a language and new customs, right? By mixing together, that's a different thing for something like acculturation or multiculturalism, because assimilation means that you or the subject of the sentence is moving somewhere and is assimilating to what's there, right? You're becoming where you're from, right? Tejal gave a good example of how their grandparents are Indian, but Tejal being in America has adopted some of those things and assimilated. I'm kind of the same way. My family is from Mexico. I'm in America, born and raised in Texas, and my Spanish isn't as good as my grandparents is. My Spanish isn't as good as my parents are, things of that nature. All right, let's go to the next question. How does tourism impact cultural landscape? Cultural landscape, that's an early topic. Early unit 3, cultural landscape. I haven't taken this one, so or any of the quizzes really, but I'm checking this to make sure if I get it right. I'm gonna tell y'all now, I'm wrong. But my vibes are leaning towards letter probably A. If I'm wrong, ooh, I should probably let Megan take it. Right. Here we go. Hey, got it right. Didn't whiff. That'd have been embarrassing. So tourism is all about going somewhere to visit the culture, visit the area, really get into, what's there, right? When you're a tourist somewhere, you go to hit all the tourist spots. You go to New York City, you want to see the Statue of Liberty, you want to see Empire State Building. You go to London, it's Big Ben. If you can go to somewhere like India, you want to see the Taj Mahal, et cetera, right? You want to see those big cultural monoliths, those really cool places, et cetera, et cetera. Let's do a few more questions. I know it's not the full 15. We're really sorry, guys. We just want to make sure we get to Unit 4. We should be able to finish Unit 4, but we want to make sure we get to Unit 4. So let's do a few more questions, then we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and then be back to Unit 4 topic. Let's do 2 more. More questions. More questions. I want to make sure we get to it quickly. Those that responded, gonna go ahead and by the way, y'all are answering really quickly. That's awesome. Timing is a big part of this. I'm gonna say this every night. We do these cram quizzes. Timing is a very, 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 very important part of this. So make sure you guys timing right. Very good. All right, let's go 3, 2, 1. Let's cultural landscape. Boom. Geographic area included. Hey, 100%. Well done. Well done. Big brain. Big brain. All right, let's do these last. Let's do one more. One more. Common result of acculturation of this society. What's the common result of acculturation? Acculturation. What does that mean? What does that mean? That's tough, Midnight. That's tough. Got it. That's why you're here. That's why you're here. We got you, dude. Some of you guys talking about FRQs. We're going to spend a good chunk of our last night reviewing FRQs, probably a little bit of our fourth night as well, just depending on how much we give to Unit 7, how long that takes us. But we're definitely going to review FRQs. I'm going to do a lot of the leading when it comes to test taking tips. Just want to make sure we do our best. But I'm actually absolutely going to have Megan and Tejal and Leah and Eliza bring in some of their test taking tips as well. But the FRQs, there's a cheat code to them. We got you. We got you. Trust. But you got to be ready for it. All right. Let's go ahead and reveal the answer. 3, 2, 1. You guys are doing it tonight. Y'all are for real killing it. Well done. So adopting other people's cultures, very good. This is a good little vocab review. Hope you guys appreciated that. We're really sorry we can't spend more time on these cram quizzes. I'm really sorry even to our student hosts who took time to make these cram quizzes and we can't even finish them because the content is just so dense. But we want to make sure we finish Unit 4. So I'm going to close out the cram quiz. Again, I appreciate you guys. And we're going to switch back to our slides. And see this to be the right one. Uh-oh, that is the wrong one. Same slides, but I want to share a different screen. Hey, there we go. That's the right one I want to share. So we're going to do a quick 5-minute break. Everybody go get some water. Everybody go to the bathroom, get a snack. When we come back, we're going to hit Unit 4 really hard. We want to double check and finish it. It's only 30 slides, but we want to make sure we get all the content to you as soon as possible, right? Be right back, everybody. Appreciate you guys. yo. What's up, y'all? All right. So we're back. We're back. We are going to run through some Unit 4 content with our homie Tejal leading the way. Me and Megan will be here in support, just like last time. But there won't be anything super different other than timing, right? I mentioned how Unit 3 was super duper dense, and so we had to spend a lot of time there. Shout out to Megan for powering through all that for real. But Unit 4 will be a little bit shorter, and so we should be able to get it done in time. We might just not get to the cram quiz like we want to, right? But that being said, the content is like a big chunk of this class, right? That's something that we've been hammering home a lot through this meeting, and our last meeting is the vocab, the theories, all that stuff. There's so much to cover. So the content, in my opinion, as a teacher host here, that's the biggest deal. So anyways, let's go ahead and get through Unit 4, right? Appreciate you guys staying focused. You guys have been awesome in the chat. Your questions have been engaging. You guys have been helping one another with content questions. You guys have been providing resources with one another. You guys are awesome, super helpful. Also, yes, shout out Mr. Sin. That dude rules. I would give my students him as a teacher. I constantly recommend him for real. Anyways, Tejal, take it away.
Okay, guys, we're going to go straight into Unit 4, which is Political Patterns and Processes. It's about 12 to 17% of the exam, so just make sure you're taking your notes and staying focused. Okay, so topic 4.1 is the essence of political geography. So political geography is a study of the spatial distribution and political organization of the world, and it talks about boundaries, relationships, and international organizations. And the next kind of topic is going to do a lot of vocabulary, so get ready for that. Okay, so we have state versus nation. So a lot of the vocabulary that we're going to be learning in the next couple of slides has to do with state or nation. So you got to make sure you have a really solid foundation on what these two mean and how they differ from each other. So a state is a political entity, and it has defined borders, and it has a government, and it's organized as a unit with the power to make and enforce laws. So it's usually self-governing, and it's a political entity. So, for example, I always think of the United States of America. It's got defined borders, it has its own government, and it's a state. It's like one big area. And then you have a nation, and a nation is different from a state as it's a large group of people rather than an actual physical area with boundaries. So a nation is a group of people that share some sort of common characteristic like language, history, culture, and their identity. And they usually live within defined borders. So they're often used to refer to a sovereign state, but not necessarily. So going along with nation and states, we also have the concept of autonomy. So autonomy and autonomous regions are the idea that you have your own freedom and you have the own power to govern yourself and control your own affairs. So example of this is any independent state. And semi-autonomous is countries and places that, have some sort of self-government, but they don't have complete self-government. So an example of this is Native American reservations. They have, their own self-governing things, but they also have to follow a lot of stuff that United States government put in place for them. So that's why they're semi-autonomous instead of having, full control. Then we have state versus nation. So we have a lot of examples, of states versus nations. So for states, we have the United States of America, People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation, Federal Republic of Germany, United Kingdom of Great Britain, and Northern Ireland. And this is basically just like countries because they all have defined borders, so they're perfect examples of states. And then we have examples of nations. We have the United States of America, the French nation, the Kurdish nation, the Maori nation, and the Japanese nation. And a lot of these examples are nation states, and we're going to get into that in the next slide. Okay, so we have nation state and multinational state. And I know a lot of the times it's hard to remember all of these things, but once you know what a nation is and what a state is, you kind of can just use context clues to kind of figure out the gaps. So a nation state is going to be, a one state that has majority of the population that is like one nation. So the majority of the population is going to share some common characteristic like in a nation. So they're going to have the same language, the same history, the same culture, and the same identity. and the government is going to represent that one nation as a whole. And because you have the same nation in one state, you're going to have this strong sense of unity because everyone believes in the same thing. They all are the same. They all have the same history. And they're going to have strong central governments. So an example of this is Japan, because Japan is a state, it has political boundaries, and the main nation, the main identity that's there, people are all Japanese. So it's perfect example of a nation state. And then you're going to have a multinational state. We see the word multi, we know that's many. So multinational state is going to be a state that has 2 or more nations within its borders. So an example of this is Nigeria. There's multiple nations living in Nigeria. So that's what makes it a multinational state. Then we have stateless nation and multi-state nations. Again, so much more vocabulary. But stateless nation is basically exactly what it sounds like. It's a nation that doesn't have its own sovereign state. Example of this are the Kurds in Kurdistan. That is something that comes up a lot on the AP exam. So I would definitely remember the Kurds as a stateless nation. Then you're going to have multi-state nations. Again, look at the word multi-state. So there's multiple different states with one nation. So that nation is going to be dispersed across 2 or more states. And an example of this is Korea. We know there's North Korea and South Korea. And overall, it's the same nation, but it's spread across 2 different political boundaries. Okay, now let's go into topic 4.2, which is historical context. So it talks a lot about nationalism. So I'm sure y'all know what nationalism is. We're just going to go through a quick definition. It's basically a political and social ideology. It was developed in the 1600s, and it emphasizes the collective identity and interests of a nation or people. So when you have a strong sense of nationalism, you're going to have like a strong sense of pride in your country and your culture, and you're going to have this unity with all the other people that live, with you and have the same nationality as you. And we also have a quick timeline on the side over here that kind of talks about when nationalism started. It goes from, the Berlin Conference to imperialism, the rise of nationalism, and how world wars, the Cold War, and decolonization also help nationalism grow a little bit. And yeah, okay. So going back to self-determination, we just see this little bubble on the side. Self-determination, something you guys got to know. It's a people's right to form their own political entity. So that's super important. Make sure to write that down or take a picture because it's going to come up a lot on the AP test. So now let's talk about colonialism and imperialism. I saw a lot of questions in the chat, like, what's the difference between the 2 of them? Honestly, it's kind of hard because they kind of correlate with one another, but imperialism is the practice of a country extending its power and influence over other countries. So say like, we can see this through like the scramble for Africa and like the Berlin Conference. A lot of countries in Europe want to show their power and their dominance over other countries. So they do that by using military force, economic coercion, or cultural domination. Now, colonialism is kind of the same thing, but it's the practice of maintaining colonies and establishing colonies in parts of the world. And they usually do this for economic exploitation, cultural assimilation, or political control. So imperialism, I'd always think power and influence, and then colonialism, just think of multiple different colonies in an area. Okay, we have territoriality, which is the concept that refers to a defined area of land or water that is claimed by a group or individual as their own and is protected by external interference. So my kind of like mnemonic device, I always think of like how animals mark their territory like around them, because they kind of want to show, hey, this is my spot, I'm gonna protect it, I'm going to keep it as my own. And countries do this with their areas of land or water, and they're going to protect it from other countries that are trying to come and take it. So that's what territoriality is. Okay, so political power. So political power refers to the ability or capacity of a government, leader, or organized group to influence, control, and manage public policy and affairs of the state. So if you look to the right, we have a little Venn diagram of like hard power, soft power, and smart power. So hard power is going to be your military force, punishment and reward, economic sanctions, and political leverage. And then soft power is going to be pop culture, mass media, and aid. And then the middle is smart power, which is going to be alliances and diplomacy. So how I remember hard power, I kind of think of like not necessarily scary things, but scarier things. Like when you think of military and punishment and reward, you kind of think, oh, scary. But then soft power, I think of, oh, it's kind of like lighter, it's not as big of a deal, pop culture, mass media. And then smart power is just the mix of both of them. Okay, now we have geopolitics. So geopolitics is the study and influence of geographical factors on the political, economic, and military affairs of a nation and region. So basically like where a country is, what kind of surrounding features it has. Does it have mountains? Does it have lakes? All of those things affect the affairs of a nation and a region. And it's used to understand the foreign policies of countries and the strategies they use to pursue their goals on the international stage. So obviously, your geographical landscape is going to determine, how powerful you are. So, if a country is by a major sea, they can use that as a port, and they can have a lot of exports and imports, and that's going to help them, pursue their goals. So geographical factors play a huge player in like making sure countries are powerful and can do what they need to do. Okay, so going along with geopolitics, we have three main things: neocolonialism, shadow belts, and choke points. So neocolonialism is the use of economical, political, cultural, or other pressures to control or influence other countries, especially former colonies. So, a lot of European powers have a lot of control and influence over some places in Africa due to the Scramble of Africa, Berlin Conference. They still have a lot of influence even after former colonies. Then you're going to have shadow belts, which are groups of politically and ethnically fragmented states located between larger, more powerful states. An example of this is Vietnam during the Cold Wars, that going along with like proxy wars and all those kind of issues. And then you have choke points, which is narrow, highly strategic geographic passageways that restrict passage from one region to another. And an example of this is the Strait of Hormuz. So choke points play a big role in the power and influence of a country. So whichever country or region has, control over that choke point, they're going to have a lot of say in what's going on. Okay, now we're going into topic 4.4, which is all about boundaries. So political boundaries are lines and areas that are used to demarcate the territory of a political entity, such as a country or a state. And we have some pictures on the right. Okay, so political boundaries, there's a bunch of different ones. I know these are hard to remember, but once you create kind of like a mnemonic device with them, they'll be pretty easy to remember which is which. So first we have antecedent, which is defined before the present-day human landscape was developed. For this one, I kind of like to think of the word ancient. Antecedent, ancient, they kind of go together, and it helps you remember that it was before humans and how they altered the landscape. Then you're going to have superimposed. This is boundaries that have been imposed on an area by an outside or conquering power. I always like to think of the example of the Berlin Conference and how European powers kind of made boundaries in Africa. And so that's an example of superimposed. Then you have geometric, which is straight lines or arcs drawn on a map without regard for physical or cultural features. Geometric, I think of math, lines, they all kind of go together. So that's my little example for there. And then you're going to have subsequent, which is defined and delimited after significant settlement has occurred. And we're going to go a little bit more into depth of what defined and delimited mean. So we'll go more into that later. And then finally, we have relic boundaries and consequent boundaries. Relic boundaries are boundaries that no longer exist as international borders, but they have some sort of cultural significance on the environment and stuff going on in that country. I like to think of the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall obviously is not in place anymore, but it still has a lot of significance on the people that are living there. And then finally, we have consequent boundaries and established in order to mitigate existing cultural or economic differences between communities. I like to think of it as consequences. You know, you have to figure out how to get rid of those cultural and economic differences, and that's like the consequence of that. You have to create those boundaries. Okay, so like I said, we're going a little bit more into depth in defined, delimitation, and demarcation. So these are how boundaries are created. And my teacher always said, you know, remember the 3 Ds because they all start with a D, so it's super easy to remember. So defined is when the exact location is established through a legal agreement and treaty. So this is like when it's actually defined and everyone knows this is a place. This is a place because it's established through legal agreements. And then you have delimitation, which is putting the boundary on a map officially. So this is when everyone's going to notice it because it's actually on a map. And then demarcation is making a boundary with fences, walls, posts, pillars, or other markers. And right now, a lot of the world's boundaries are not demarcated, but it still does happen in certain places. Okay, so here are some important international boundaries for you guys to know. We have the KPKR Korean DMZ, which is the Korean demilitarized, I can't even say the word, guys, demilitarized zone, which is a buffer zone that separates North and South Korea. And it was established by the UN after the Korean War. It's always like, it's like a difference between North and South Korea, so it kind of, guys, I'm blanking. I'm just going to go on to the next one, which is the international date line, which is an imaginary line that runs from the North Pole to the South Pole, marking the beginning of each calendar day. And then we have the Mexico-United States border, and it's 1,951 miles long, and it's the busiest border in the world. Runs from the Pacific Ocean in the west to the Gulf of Mexico in the east. So a lot of these are really important to know. I think the one I learned about the most and I use on my AP exam was the Korean Demilitarized Zone, the DMZ. So I would definitely remember that one. And this slide, we just have a few pictures of those boundaries. So we have the Korean one on the left, and then you have the North and South Pole one in the middle, and then finally the Mexico one and the United States one. Okay, so now we have types of boundary disputes. So a lot of the times when you have a boundary between 2 countries, you're going to have a lot of disputes over the 2 different countries in the area. So we have definitional, operational, allocational, and locational. Definitional is centered all on legal issues. And then operational is going to be on how a boundary should function, like what the boundary should be doing. Allocational is conflict over stuff, and this stuff can be oil, gas, seafloor, bridges, and water. A lot of it is going to be natural resources. And then locational are definitions not disputed, the interpretation is. And then we have a picture of just a boundary on the left here. Okay, we're getting close, guys. We're at topic 4.5, which is impact on people of political boundaries. So we're going to talk about migration, regulation, cultural exchange barriers, or facilitators. A super important vocabulary term to know is irredentism. We talk about that a lot in the next couple of slides. It's a political movement or ideology that seeks to reclaim and incorporate into a country territory that is seen as historically or culturally linked to that country, but which is currently controlled by another state. So simple definition, it's basically when like a minority country wants to separate or come into another country's territory because they have a lot of their own cultural significance in that state. Okay, so let's talk about the economic implications of political boundaries. This is going to be your trade agreements, your economic unions, or your blocks. So boundaries are all about economy and resources. Resources being like environmental resources, like what's going on in the environment, what are those natural resources? And a lot of these resources come from the ocean as well. That's a really important thing to know. Okay, this is UNCLOS. Guys, this was one of the things that was so hard for me to remember, and I think it's just because there's so many things that are going on, but once you get like the main idea of it, it's going to be super easy. So it stands for the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And it talks about how far, a country's influence should spread into the oceans. Like, the country already has so much influence on land, so how much should it spread, out into the ocean? And there's 4 main things that it kind of talks about. It talks about territorial sea, contiguous zone, exclusive economic zone, also known as EEZ, and high seas. So territorial sea is 12 nautical miles of full sovereignty. So that means that, from the land, from the country itself, those first 12 miles, you're going to have full control over what they want to do. And then you're going to have your contiguous zone, and this is limited sovereignty up to 24 nautical miles. So what it means by limited sovereignty is you're going to have, power over immigration and customs. And then you're going to have your exclusive economic zone, which is basically saying, like, within the 200-mile nautical radius of the country, you can explore, extract minerals, and manage those 200 miles. And then finally, we have high seas. So anything beyond the EEZ, anything beyond those 200 miles is open to all states, and all states, can have some sort of power and influence over it. So this is just a quick picture of how the UNCLOS works. So you're going to see your territorial sea, which is 12 miles, and then your second longest arrow is going to be your contiguous zone, which is the 24 miles. Your exclusive economic zone is going to be that 200 miles, and then beyond that is going to be your high sea. Okay, we're getting into 4.6 electoral geography. I saw a lot of you guys talking about gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is, awesome, so we're going to talk about that. The key concept is elected officials are designated to define districts with distinct boundaries called the voting districts. And so voting districts, redistricting, and gerrymandering affect election results at various scales. So we're going to talk about that. Okay, so we have internal boundaries, we have reapportionment and redistricting. So reapportionment is basically, because of the census, which we all know what the census is, it's kind of like gathering totals of the population in the US. The government determines each state's number of representatives through reapportionment to reflect the state's population. So the higher the state population is, the more representatives you're going to have. The lower the population is, the lower number of representatives you're going to have. And because of reapportionment, you have redistricting, which is the process through which district boundaries are redrawn to contain roughly the same number of people. So a lot of that happens because of the census, and both of these two topics relate to each other. Okay, now we have gerrymandering, everyone's favorite thing. So gerrymandering is honestly, it's like an unfair advantage. So it's basically a practice that's used to manipulate the boundaries of electoral districts in order to give an unfair advantage to a political party or group. So on the right, we see like a picture, and it just shows how the boundaries are drawn just to kind of favor one political party over another political party. And a lot of the times this is super unfair, but this is what gerrymandering is, and it's something that happens in this day and age. Okay, so now we have political landscape. So a lot of regions have different issues and priorities. Example of this is the urban-rural divide, which is basically saying urban areas and rural areas have different point of views on, how they should rule. And then we have socioeconomic factors as well, which is just how a society, should work under economic situations. Okay, now we're going into topic 4.7, which is governance systems. So we first have federal states and then unitary states. Federal states are locally based, and they have smaller governments, and they don't have one big huge government like unitary states. You're going to have federal governments and a bunch of different ones that are kind of governing themselves in this one big country. So the perfect example of this is the USA. We have 3 different forms of government, and we're all comprised of smaller federal governments, or smaller governments and then one federal government. And then unitary states, they're going to have one centralized form of government. So I always think of unit as one. So unitary states always have one, and they're really centralized. And an example of this is France. They have a unitary form of government, and it's super centralized. So now we have democracy and autocracy. So democracy is basically the idea that the people should have a say in the decisions that a government makes and how it affects their lives. And sometimes that can be directly, like, I can have a say in what the government does, but other times it's through elected representatives, and that's why people in democracy vote for who they want to be speaking for them. And then autocracy is, guys, I just can't pronounce anything today, but y'all know what I mean. So it's basically a form in which one person or group holds absolute power. And Hector, you're trying to say something, or are you good?
Nope, you're good.
Oh, okay. It's basically saying that like this one person is going to make all the decisions, and the people aren't going to have any say in what's going on in those decisions about the government. Okay, so topic 4.8, we have devolutionary pressures. So first of all, devolution is kind of this idea. It's like when power kind of breaks apart from, central government to regional governments. And sometimes it can also be when like a state breaks up, and like the balkanization of states as well. So a lot of the times there's a bunch of different pressures that cause, states to go into these devolutionary factors. So we have physical geography, ethnic separatism, terrorism, economic and social issues, and irredentism, which we talked about before. So physical geography can cause isolation due to natural features. An example of this is Taiwan and China. So like physical geography, if you have a mountain separating between these two areas or a big ocean, obviously there's going to be some sort of devolution. Then you're going to have ethnic separatism, which is when there's like a minority group, or when there's a minority group in a dominant culture, and so those minority groups are going to fight for independence. Then you have terrorism, which is organized violence, and it's usually for some sort of political goal. We have economic and social issues, and this usually happens because a lot of people in the area have different languages, cultures, religions, or economic disparities, which means like there's a lot of like poverty, and like there's a huge economic and like money divide between two areas. And then irredentism is annexation of other regions because of a shared culture or language. Sorry guys, there's like a fly that keeps on like buzzing near my ear, so I need to get it out of here. Okay, so 4.9, we have challenges to sovereignty. So we know sovereignty is kind of like the freedom to rule your own government, a country's ability to rule and have power. So supranationalism is the idea that states or other political entities should transfer some of their sovereignty to a supranational governing body. So supranational organizations, just a quick reminder, it's kind of like when a bunch of countries come together and they create this organization to address common challenges and achieve shared goals. So an example of these supranational organizations, we have the European Union, NATO, USSR, United Nations, African Union, and the Arctic Council. And here's some just like quick images on how these supranational organizations are set up throughout the world. So going along with challenges to sovereignty, we have technological impact. So technology like our phones, social media, it's made devolution, democratization, and supranationalism more prevalent. So example of this is European Union and the Arab Spring. I always learned about the Arab Spring. It's basically a bunch of movements in the Middle East and parts of Africa to, more democratic forms of government. And because of technology, it was able to spread all across the Middle East, and people were able to share their protests and their revolts on social media, and it gained like this really big following. So it's a huge challenge to sovereignty. So impact of globalization. So globalization has diluted the state sovereignty through economic interdependence. So it's through economic interdependence, what it's trying to say is that like all of these countries are so connected that if one country falls, the other country is going to fall because they have so many different resources and corporations and everything going between these two. And state factors influence individual countries' sovereignty as well. So again, examples, those supranational organizations, European Union, you have NAFTA, United Nations, things like that. Okay, now we have interventionalism. So interventionalism is, they've kind of like diluted state sovereignty through international intervention. So driving forces, we have all of these alliances, whether it be military or economic, and these trade agreements, they've made supranationalism more common. And then we have non-state factors, which are like multinational corporations, and those influence state authority. Multinational corporations are kind of like businesses that spread across multiple different countries. And that's going to influence state authority because, you know, if you have a business that's in so many different countries, obviously your country is not going to be that main central, you know, authority, and it's not going to have all the power because so many other countries have the same thing. Okay, now we have centripetal and centrifugal forces. We kind of already went, you know, and talked about those in Unit 3. So centripetal are forces that bring the country together, and this can be, you know, a common sense of like culture, a language, or ideology. Anyway. And with centripetal forces, you have this form of ethnic nationalism and even development and cultural cohesion. So centripetal forces are really good for a country and a government, and it really helps unite a country and make them more powerful. And then we have centrifugal forces, which are things that divide a country, and this can be, you know, religious conflict, and we can divide between two religions. It can be multiple different languages in an area or ethnic differences. And because there's so many differences and this like country is not united, it leads to failed states, uneven development, and nationalist movements because a lot of people, you know, want to come to power and show, you know, the minority is important to, not just the majority. Okay, so going on with some effects for centripetal forces, it can lead to either nationalism or a strong national identity, like a really strong sense of nationalism in your country and what you do. And it can also bring a suppression of regional identities. And it mitigates division, so there's not going to be a major divide between the people in the country because all of them share all of these same characteristics, like culture. And in centrifugal forces, we're going to see a lot of devolutionary pressures. It's going to lead to the decentralization of power, challenges to sovereignty, and uneven development. And you're going to have strong regional governments and a lot of independence movements. Okay, so for review, we learned about how geopolitical theories apply to contemporary international relationships, how colonial era boundaries and the impact on their current geopolitical conflicts, how supranational organisms or organizations affect the sovereignty of individual countries, and what are the implications of devolution for global politics. So I'm going to turn it over to Hector real quick.
Hey, thank you, Tejal. Appreciate you. Hey, guys, we made it to the end of Unit 4 content. That was a crap ton of material in just 30 minutes. Big shout out to Tejal for knocking that out efficiently, well spoken, great content understanding. Well done, well done, well done. So, while we get the Unit 4 cram quiz ready for y'all, I'm going to post it here as what we call on our end call to action. On y'all's end should be just this really cool button. Go ahead and share my screen for that too. I want to take a moment to respond to some of y'all's questions you had in the chat that we just couldn't get to earlier. So here's RNC, y'all are joining. Appreciate you guys. Y'all are awesome. A couple of things. First of all, things like balkanization, things like devolution, those vocab words are super important. I want to reiterate, balkanization is a form of devolution that refers to not only that peninsula in Europe, right, the Balkan Peninsula, but also refers to specifically the breakup of a country into separate countries like that. Devolution is the process in which that kind of starts and things of that nature, but it's yeah, they're separated in that regard. Going into some of the Q&A questions I saw, things like, for example, what is the definition of irredentism? It is the process in which a country wants its territory back because of historical or cultural reasons. Hang on, music is not playing right now. Bummer. Going into some other questions, I saw things like who actually draws the voting districts. In the United States, the voting districts are drawn up by the state government. And so gerrymandering is a process in which the state government or federal government oftentimes will manipulate voting districts in order to basically take control of that voting district with different manipulation tactics. There's specific ways to gerrymander. It's unlikely you'll see just specific vocab like that, but there are specific ways to gerrymander. An example of an autocracy could be somewhere like the Saudi Arabia kingdom, right? It's a kingdom. It is one person in charge. Autocracies that you guys might be more aware of, like North Korea. I don't want to say China because technically China does have a government where people can vote, so it's unfair to say that. But Saudi Arabia and North Korea, there is one dude in charge, and that dude makes the rules. Yeah. So, anyways, I also want to shout out Megan for being so quick with all the responses to you guys about testing. That is a big, big deal. I know you guys are stressed. I also appreciate Leah and Eliza for helping keeping the chat active. You guys are awesome. This has been a really, really busy night, but you guys have stayed engaged, asking awesome questions, staying focused. We really appreciate you guys. We're going to end tonight by doing this cram quiz, going over some more multiple choice practice and things of that nature. And then before we wrap up, I'll be sending out a survey where just like some like feedback on how we did. Interventionalism. I see how you spell it there, Maria. Sorry, not Maria. Nirajan. Is essentially a fancy way of saying that there's a country intervening in another country. It's in the name, right? Interventionalism and then intervene. I would think of that as a devolutionary pressure only because of history. Like, well, I guess it depends on your political leanings nowadays, but you can see there are historical examples of countries actively intervening in other countries' downfalls. If you take a look at the U.S. history in South America, I'll zoom in a little bit. The CIA did some pretty nasty work in South America. If you take a look at what's happening right now in Southwest Asia, Southwest Asia, Saudi Arabia and Iran are currently beefing over who's going to be the predominant Muslim power in Southwest Asia. So what's going on is a proxy war, right? And so they're constantly intervening in places like Yemen, Iraq, Syria. And each country is like, I forget if Iran is the primarily Shia country and Saudi Arabia is primarily the Sunni country or vice versa. But anyways, when you have a foreign country intervene, that's what interventionalism. Yeah. Anyways, let's go ahead and start the cram quiz. Yeah. Let's see how it goes. Let's go and start the quiz. 3, 2, 1. It doesn't want to work anyways. Unfortunate. All right. What country serves as an example of a unitary state? Unitary state meaning a government is in charge top to bottom. Top to bottom. A couple more seconds. We got about half of us. Hey, there we go. Rocking up there. Very good. We covered this a little bit earlier, Jared, but a sequent occupants refers to what happens when a part of the world or a part of a city changes its like major cultural population, right? So you have one group living in a neighborhood that might be one ethnicity. Whenever they eventually migrate out of the neighborhood for whatever reason, a sequence, right? A sequence, the next person comes in and hangs out in that neighborhood, changes the characteristics of that neighborhood, etc., etc. Sequent occupants refers to the sequence of the occupants of that area. Let's go ahead and reveal this answer in 3, 2, 1. AW, France. So this might come as a shock. I don't want you guys to associate unitary with a dictatorship or autocracy or anything like that. A unitary government can be just as democratic as any other government. It's all about it's a lot of times about the size. I don't want to always assume or make you guys assume that a small country is always unitary and a large country is always federal. But a country like the size of France that's small enough to where Paris can play a lot of influence on the whole rest of the country, then France is that, right? Brazil, United States, India, super large countries and have these smaller sub-states, what we call them, right? That have a more political independence, right? Hey, it's all right, Parker. One question is not going to kill you, right? In fact, a lot of y'all have been saying this in the chat, but even, hey, there's the music. Even 50% multiple choice correct and good FRQs can land you a passing grade or 4 or even a 5. BJ, if I can see your question here, just putting it. I like to think of devolution as more your first section there. It's about the process in which a country splits up, right? Like I said, Pakistan, India. But the reason that Canada and Quebec are a good example here is because of just how much a country, a province like Quebec likes to be different from the rest of Canada, right? They really exhibit a lot of devolutionary pressures, and they're like, we want to be separate, want to be different, want to be unique. So I would say think of devolution as a process, not an event. Devolution is a process that leads to balkanization, or just essentially a country falling apart. So devolution is a process in which they get there. I can see the confusion, and I hate to do this because it feels like a non-answer, but both are probably correct. So the music, I don't want to speak much over the music. Yeah, sorry about that, Parker. Good call. I'm gonna do this a little more. Hopefully that's better to everybody. All right, most of us have responded. 3, 2, 1. Reveal answer. A, W again. In what ways does evolution impact structure of a country, of control within a country? Yeah, if you grant that autonomy to several little sections, you start to destroy some of that central power, right? Very good, very good. All right, to the next question. Yeah, sorry about that, DR. Turn the music down a little bit. Turn the music down more, DR. I know, Rachel, music is pumping. Vibes going. Which political system exemplifies the decentralization of power, decentralizing that power? If unitary was about putting the power into one place, right? Like France has Paris, the United Kingdom has London, or your larger country like China has Beijing. There's the opposite of that. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. A, W, A. Very good, very good, very good. All right. Nothing really to add to that. I appreciate that you guys can think about something like B, C, and D. I can understand where that comes from, right? If you decentralize power, you might think about, well, power is not coming to everybody. It's not for everything, blah, 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 right? But definitely think of the vocab here. Central power means in one person. Uh-oh, that was scary. But we got power back. We got connection back. But centralized power referring to one person, right? Decentralizing, separating it, federal. We already answered this question, so I'm just going to reveal their answer again, and then I'm going to go to the next question. All right, here we go. Question 4. What kind of thematic mapping technique would be useful to compare the total votes received by 2 major political candidates across different countries? This is a useful idea because, useful question, pardon me, because it's asking you to bring in some Unit 1 content and some Unit 4 content. And even though we're going to refer to these questions as trivia style questions, these are very specifically designed with the high level vocab, which is important. Excuse me. And also, it's a very unique question because, pardon me, it's forcing you to come up with 2 topics. It's a really big deal for AP questions. These questions are going to force you to come up with multiple ideas at once. I saw your question there, Zaid, about if we're doing this the whole time. We'll probably start a little bit towards the end, just before it gets to our last hour, our last couple minutes, because I want to be able to share some surveys with you guys and some resources I'm working on. They're in the process of, being built, but I want to give you guys as early as possible some resources regarding multiple choice practice and networking practice and some resources to do a little extra studying. So I got you. Yeah, Leah, I will explain it in once we reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. So let's discuss this question really quickly. Thematic map. Think back to Unit 1. We discussed this a little bit yesterday. Thematic maps are maps that show you data based on some sort of information, right? A reference map is normally 99% of the time it's a political or a physical map. Okay, so thematic map. That means we need to think of some sort of reference picture, right? So all 4 of these are thematic maps. Proportional symbols, flow line, graduated symbols. I've never seen that word. Not gonna know what that word means. Not gonna pronounce it correctly. Arithmetic, maybe. Who knows? Anyways, thematic map using comparing total votes received by 2 major political candidates across different counties. Pardon me, counties, not countries. Pardon me earlier. Counties. Graduated symbol refers to a symbol that has a longer length, or I should say a taller length, to show more data. Very similar to letter D. I can understand why you guys might have thought D. D is probably the second best choice here, and I can definitely get that, right? Really quick to answer some other questions you guys might have. A dot map might be a useful thing here, but I don't think that would be really useful because dots represent individual data points, and just cramming a bunch of data onto one county and then versus the other county might not be really useful. The flow line map is a map that shows you guys data based on an arrow and a line. The larger that arrow and line, the more data that moves. The smaller that arrow and line, the less data that moves. Oftentimes it's used to show trade or migration. Flow line maps are used to show weather patterns a lot of the time. Weather patterns, kind of if you're watching the news ever and you see the weather, you see like this little flowy line is really red. Some heat wave is coming. That's a flow line map. Okay. Anyways, I can appreciate the confusion here. This is a tough one. Not only are you bringing in two separate contents, but it's asking you to remember a bunch of different kinds of maps. That's a difficult question. I can understand the confusion there. Next question. What type of political boundary is formed as a result of conflict or war? This is a tough one because I can tell you right now. So there is a difference between we're thinking of this question or the previous question. BJ, I'm sorry. If you're thinking about the previous question, the symbols are different because they're bigger symbols. As a graduated symbol is taller. Larger symbols, taller symbols. As reached the end over time, anyone have it? Okay, yeah, Jared, thanks for doing that. Personal symbol used to display national election in this sense. I would say not really, Matthew. I think a national election would likely be something like what we normally see in the United States is we see a choropleth map, colors. Blue for Democrats, red for Republicans is what we see in the United States a lot. In this map, yeah, midnight. This one is definitely A or C. Sorry for spoiling it for anybody who picked B or D. I'm super sorry, but A or C is one of the correct answers here. Sahasra, I'm sorry about the confusion. I'm happy to help you guys out a little bit towards the end. I'll stick around just a little bit later. Let's go ahead and reveal the question or the answer in 3, 2, 1. Whoa, even I got that one wrong. What? Relic boundary. I don't like that. That's a bad question, bro. Relic boundary means an old boundary, right? And so this one straight up is C, bro. This is a bad question, bro. Respectfully, this is a bad question. Every other question we've done tonight, I've been super into and I like it. This question, not a fan of. Yeah. All y'all's hus and us, that's my vibes right now too. I'm gonna pretend this question is wrong and that we're all right together if you picked A or C because those are way better choices than D. Yeah, it's definitely a mistake. I didn't mean to lie. I think respectfully, whoever made this question didn't know what they're talking about. That's gonna be my excuse. I think A or C are the better choices here, responsibly. Let's do one more question so we can pack up and we can go over things like surveys and things like that. Yeah. If you picked A, by the way, if you picked A or C, you're the right ones. The answer is D, incorrect. Next question. All right. Which scenario exemplifies how economic interest can drive border disputes? That's a tough one. I'll give you guys a little bit longer on this one. This is a long question. A relic boundary is an old boundary. Just an old boundary, meaning oftentimes it doesn't exist anymore. And while I might understand the question maker's thought process, I disagree entirely. Subsequent boundary is a boundary that exists only after settlement has already happened, while superimposed boundary is a boundary that exists because of some outside force imposing it, oftentimes colonial. Yeah, Parker, I think the previous question, A or C, are the better choices. And yeah, Leah is correct. Although we're the ones hosting this process, we just have access to Fiveable's quizzes and Cram quizzes and stuff ahead of time. We didn't get to make the individual questions. So this question, which scenario exemplifies how economic interest can drive border disputes? Border disputes. Things about political autonomy in oil-rich lands. Population voting for independence based on identifications. An interesting cultural thing. Claiming offshore fishing rights. Okay. I have my ideas here, but I don't want to say it and be wrong again. I'll feel bad. So I don't want to mislead you guys. Border disputes and equal water disputes, right? BJ, that's a good question. That's a really good question. Land versus sea is an important thing to distinguish. I would argue that the context of the question, if the question is implying border disputes regarding like some sort of, we'll say EEZ, right? The water territory, then it can be the same thing. In this context, I have my thought, BJ, but I don't want to mislead you guys again. So I'm going to wait until the answer is revealed in approximately 3 seconds. Sure thing, I'll read it a little more. Hey, it's better, right? All right, let's go. 3, 2, 1. Okay, I didn't say because I didn't want to mislead you guys. I thought it was gonna be A or C, but the reason I thought it was only gonna be A is because A is referring specifically to these borders, right? The recognized and limits. A is referring to political autonomy. So the tough one here, yeah, I see you guys about D too. I got you. The tough one here is that A is like misleading you guys because it talks about this oil-rich lands. C, however, is specifically talking about these like extending beyond these limits and talking about specific rights regarding those limits. Right? It's a tough one. That's a tough one. And again, I've said this before, these might be trivia style, but these questions are difficult like they would be on the AP exam. So let's get into the ones that definitely, in my opinion, respectfully, definitely are not is. So why not be an island population voting for independence based on identification within nearby island culture rather than mainland politics? Tell you right now, the reason it can't be B, nothing to do with economics. There's no money involved, no trade involved, nothing there. Can't be B, guys. Sorry about that. D, a landlocked country that's negotiating for corridor access to the sea for trade purposes. Not a bad idea to put that, but when you think about a border dispute and driving up disputes based on economic interests, I don't think necessarily that's going to create conflict. I think that's really more about negotiating, right? If you're negotiating, that means you're willing to make compromises and talk through things. So it's not really there. A tough one, but A or C are the best two choices. C is only correct because of the specific language being used, right? That specific thing about fishing rights and recognizing those limits. A tough one, but a close one. All right, y'all. We have reached our time. I am so sorry we couldn't do the whole cram quiz like we normally do. I have to cut us off. I say normally do, but these time crunches have always gotten to us. We haven't finished the cram quiz just quite yet. I do before we leave. I want to talk to you guys about a couple of things. First of all, here at the bottom of the presentation screen where we have the cram quiz link, I'm going to replace that with the survey link. So this survey link is a feedback survey for tonight. Please, 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 please give us a survey, some feedback, fill out the survey because we want to make sure that we did right by you guys as best we could. Don't be shy. Feel free to be honest, be critical. If you felt that we didn't cover enough, you felt we were too fast, too slow, you want more cram quiz time, let us know how we can do better by you guys. Please, 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 please. Before we leave, to answer some more questions, I see that you're talking about things like the cram quiz time on your own. I think Fiveable has that ability on your own, Allie, not through us. This is night 2, Parker. We still have night 3 tomorrow, where we're going to be covering units 5 and 6. Those 2 units are also super dense, and they're both the longest units in this class. So we're going to be moving just as fast as today. Okay. Then we have our night 4 covering unit 7, along with filling in some of these gaps. Like, for example, we missed unit 2. We got to go back and finish unit 2. We'll also be doing some cram quizzing there. Then our night 5 will be covering some survey. Sorry, not some survey. I just read the word again. We're covering some test taking tips. While you have the survey link at the bottom of the screen, me and your student host presenters, we've been putting together a Google Doc that has a bunch of exam prep tips and tricks. And so while it's not done, make sure I have this right, share the link with anybody, and it says viewer only. Good, so you guys can't go in there and start editing on accident. But this document I'm posting in the chat right now is a Google Doc that I've made. And what it is a quick Google Doc that has a bunch of things like some screenshots of some test prep things that I've shown my students, the FRQ practice, some multiple choice practice. It also has, in fact, let me just share the screen so I can just stay on one thing at a time. It also has some examples of, at the bottom here, has some examples of things that your own student hosts have done, including, I wrote some, but they themselves did. You can see some examples from Megan about study tips. You can see some examples from Eliza talking about recall, practice your recall, right? It's talking about Leah make sure don't be stressed. I definitely recommend you take your morning and just relax yourself, do your best to be calm. And Tejal coming in really, really smartly with that time management. Anyways, all those. Notice here I have a section about extra resources. I haven't filled that part out yet. It's my fault. I'm going to fill that out for you guys soon, I promise. And then very lastly, a lot of y'all were talking about, oh, do we need to have examples? Do we need examples? All your examples right here. Boom, I got you. These are examples that I use in class daily. They're examples that cover a bunch of historical things. They're examples that cover a bunch of modern day things. Watch those videos. Play. There's a game in there about gerrymandering. There's a few articles in there. Read, practice. watch the videos or two. I appreciate you guys, all your kind words tonight. You guys have been awesome. Thank you guys for being so not just like efficient and professional and awesome in the chat, but you guys were also kind to each other, really helpful. I really appreciate you guys being awesome students. Definitely bringing the AP Human Geo name up to the highest level. You guys are awesome. That being said, I'm gonna post the document link one more time in case it gets lost in the chat. We got to dip out. You guys are awesome. Have a good rest of your night. Get some good night rest. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back here tomorrow, same time, same place. Peace out, homies. Have a good one, everybody. Bye, y'all.